Hi guys. Tonight we step quietly into the biting dark of a Viking winter, where the wind gnaws at every timber and snow drives sideways across the North Sea like shards of glass. You pull your cloak tighter, though it barely matters. The cold here doesn't sting, it seeps, slow and patient, into bone and thought alike. You probably won't survive this, at least not without learning a few old secrets. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, and let's walk together into the frozen world of the Vikings to see how they managed to sleep through deadly blizzards without freezing to death. You trudge along the narrow path between drifts taller than a man. The snow crunches under your boots, dense, squeaky, layered like stale bread. There's no horizon, only white on black. The faint orange glow ahead promises life. A Viking longhouse, half buried in snow, exhaling thin smoke through a hole in its roof. The smell of wood resin and singed pine greets you long before the warmth does. For a people who carve dragons into their ships and gods into their doorframes, this structure is another kind of beast, a wooden creature with ribs of oak and a hide of turf. It crouches low against the wind, patient, protective, and wise. Inside, the first thing you notice is the dimness. Only the flicker of a hearth cuts through the gloom. Your breath hangs in front of you, joining dozens of others. You hear low laughter, the shuffle of boots, the muted clank of iron. The air is thick, smoky, animal, lived in. It smells of bodies, wet wool and burnt fat. And yet, it's safe. Safe enough to sleep, even while the world outside is trying its best to erase everything warm and breathing. The Vikings didn't build these halls for comfort in our modern sense. They were fortresses against nature's indifference. In winter, the longhouse became the center of the world, a single shared lung breathing heat and stories. You edge closer to the fire, and someone nods, offering you a seat on a bench covered in reindeer hide. The fur feels rough but warm beneath your fingers, and you realize the trick to surviving here wasn't about fighting the cold, it was about embracing it, reshaping life around it until even the ice had its place. You glance upward and notice how the smoke curls lazily through a small opening in the roof. It doesn't escape easily. The Vikings designed it that way. The smoke clings, thickening the air, reducing heat loss. It's uncomfortable. Sure, you cough once, twice, but your skin starts to thaw. Historians still argue whether the Vikings truly understood the physics of insulation or simply stumbled upon it through centuries of trial. Either way, the result is the same. A space where even blizzards become background noise. A woman beside the fire hums while mending a tunic. Her needle glints in the amber light. You notice she's barefoot. It's warmer here than you thought. The walls, made of overlapping planks stuffed with moss, trap more than heat. They hold stories, arguments, laughter. Each family's longhouse was unique, but all followed the same principle. Low ceilings to keep warmth near the body, narrow rooms to limit drafts, and doors so small you must bow to enter, perhaps out of reverence, perhaps simply to keep the cold from charging in uninvited. In the far corner, a child drifts to sleep wrapped in a sheepskin. His mother lays another layer over him, wool on fur, fur on wool. You can hear his soft breathing beneath the low murmur of the adults. The rhythmic crackle of fire punctuates the moment like a heartbeat. Out there, beyond these wooden walls, the temperature might drop to 20 or 30 below, the wind slicing through open fjords. But here, it's steady, manageable, survivable. A mainstream historical fact. Viking longhouses could stretch up to 75 feet, housing entire families, slaves, and livestock under one smoky roof. The warmth of both man and beast created a shared climate inside a microcosm of life teetering on the edge of winter's cruelty. Yet, strangely enough, some of the most effective insulation came not from the architecture but from what you can't see. A layer of packed straw between wall planks and the outer turf. It soaked up moisture, deadened sound, and sealed the warmth. Quirky, perhaps, that something as humble as barn sweepings could save lives more efficiently than iron armor. You lean back, your body slowly accepting the rhythm of the place. People talk softly, mostly of food, weather, and spirits. The Norse world blurred the line between practical and mystical. Warmth wasn't just physical, it was divine. They believed in hearth spirits, protectors of the flame, small, unseen presences that watched over sleeping families. Maybe that belief was its own kind of insulation, a psychological blanket when the snow piled high enough to bury doors. Outside, the blizzard continues its relentless dance, erasing tracks, silencing the world. Inside, you start to understand the genius of Viking survival. It wasn't a war against cold, it was an alliance with it. They learned its language, how snow muffled sound and trapped heat, how darkness conserved energy, how smoke could be a friend. They didn't seek luxury, they sought endurance. And endurance, in the north, was the truest form of peace. You settle deeper into the reindeer hide, the smell of resin and tallow filling your lungs. The hum of voices fades to a low vibration, soothing as the seas lull. Someone adjusts the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward, tiny stars caught in slow motion. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine centuries of nights like this, families breathing in unison, the walls sighing, the storm outside forgotten. Maybe that's the secret. Not the fire, not the fur, but the togetherness. The sense that in this great, indifferent cold, you are not alone. The warmth of the fire lingers on your skin as your eyes adjust to the longhouse's dim, flickering light. You take in the structure around you, its deliberate, rugged beauty. The longhouse is more than shelter. It's an organism. Each beam, each plank, each smoky breath of air plays a role in keeping its inhabitants alive through the long, merciless Scandinavian winter. You run your fingers along the wall. The timber feels ancient, even though it's newly cut. Thick vertical posts of oak form a rib cage, joined by curved beams overhead that arch like the spine of a whale. Between these timbers, planks of pine are packed with moss, straw, and clay. The seams are rough but tight. The smell of resin mixes with damp earth. You realize this entire house is built to breathe, not airtight, but alive, exhaling just enough to keep the smoke from choking everyone while holding in precious warmth. A dog dozes near the door, curled tight like a comma. Beyond it, the outer world is an endless storm of white. Here, however, the longhouse is its own universe, self-contained, humming with quiet persistence. The Vikings designed their homes for survival first, comfort second, and dignity third. There were no wasted lines, no fragile beauty. Every angle existed because winter demanded it. You notice how the floor rises slightly toward the walls. That subtle slope isn't an accident, it channels spills, rainwater, even melted snow toward the center, where it evaporates near the fire. A Viking floor wasn't made of polished boards, but of packed earth, layered with straw and rushes. Each day, that straw was trampled into insulation. Each night, new reeds were scattered to absorb moisture and smell. Historians still debate whether this system evolved from ancient Bronze Age huts, or if it was perfected later, when the Norse spread into harsher territories like Iceland. Either way, it worked. It turned mud into a mattress for an entire civilization. At the center of the hall, a single hearth crackles with slow confidence. There is no chimney, just a small vent in the roof, little more than a slit. Smoke rolls upward in grey ribbons, pooling near the rafters before escaping reluctantly into the night. You'd think it would be unbearable, but somehow, the room feels balanced, warm enough to thaw fingers, smoky enough to keep insects and spirits at bay. You cough softly, your eyes watering, and someone chuckles from across the fire. They've all grown used to it. Smoke, after all, meant life. A mainstream historical fact. Viking longhouses often featured thick turf layers on their roofs, sometimes over 2 feet deep. The turf wasn't decoration. It provided insulation and, surprisingly, stability. As the ground froze and thawed, The turf expanded and contracted with the house, sealing gaps that would otherwise let the cold seep in. From a distance, these houses blended seamlessly into the landscape, half earth, half man, as if grown rather than built. They were shelters camouflaged by necessity. A man near the far end stirs the coals, and for a moment, the fire's light flares, illuminating the sleeping platforms along both sides of the hall. They're built from timber planks, raised just high enough to avoid the chill of the floor. Each is draped in pelts, fox, sheep, bear, reindeer. Some are still damp from melted snow. The smell of animal hides fills the air, rich and musky. You imagine lying down there, cocooned in the heat of bodies and fur, listening to the crackle of fire and the steady rhythm of breathing around you. The longhouse isn't quiet, not truly. It whispers creaking wood, shifting straw, muffled snores, the occasional cough. All those tiny sounds knit together into a strange kind of lullaby. You move closer to the far end of the hall, where the air feels cooler. The space narrows, and there's a row of low benches, each carved roughly but solid. You notice a doorway partitioned by a hanging woolen curtain. Behind it lies the byre, the animal section. The faint smell of hay and manure drifts through. It's not unpleasant, more earthy than foul. You realize something remarkable. The animals aren't kept separate for convenience, they're part of the heating system. Their combined body heat, rising through the wooden wall, warms the human sleeping space on the other side. Quirky, yes, but incredibly practical. A woman passes by carrying a small clay lamp, its flame quivering in the draught. She places it in a wall niche carved between beams. The light trembles, illuminating a small carving of a horse, probably a symbol of Freyr, god of fertility and harvest. Vikings didn't separate the sacred from the domestic. Their homes were temples of survival, where every breath of heat, every flicker of fire, was a prayer answered. You reach up and brush against a hanging bunch of dried herbs, thyme and juniper, their scent faint but fresh. They served many purposes: cooking, medicine, and the quiet superstition that fragrant air kept sickness away. Historians still argue whether the Vikings understood germs in any practical sense, or if they simply followed instinct. But as you breathe in that clean green note amidst the smoke and musk, you feel something anciently human, an urge to make life just a little sweeter, even in the grip of winter. The wind howls outside again, a long, moaning sound like an animal calling for lost kin. The walls groan in answer but do not yield. You think of all the storms these houses must have endured, of how the people inside would sit around the fire, trading sagas and jokes while the snow buried the world. The architecture didn't just shield them, it fostered community. With no windows and only firelight to go by, people faced each other, spoke, shared. That closeness was warmth, to an emotional insulation that modern heating can't replace. The fire dims, someone adds a log, and the orange light dances once more across faces, shadows, and beams. You can almost hear the centuries hum through the wood. The longhouse stands as a quiet defiance against extinction, a reminder that survival isn't about domination but balance. You can't beat the cold. You can only learn to breathe with it, to live inside it without letting it take you. As you lie back against the rough plank wall, the vibrations of the storm seem distant, softened by layers of turf and moss. You can feel the warmth radiating from the hearth, sinking through your skin. For a fleeting moment, you understand the brilliance of Viking engineering, simple materials, timeless logic, and faith that the structure would hold, because it always had. Your eyelids grow heavy. The murmur of the hall fades into rhythm, soft, steady, reassuring. The longhouse creaks once more, as if sighing, then settles into silence. The night deepens, and the rhythm of the longhouse slows to a steady, shared breath. You sit near the fire, mesmerized by the way the flames twist and bend with every whisper of wind sneaking through the roof vent. The hearth is small, barely large enough for a few split logs, yet it feels like the beating heart of this entire wooden creature. Without it, the longhouse would be nothing but a coffin of ice. According to archaeological evidence, Viking hearths were placed precisely in the center of the main room, not at the edges like in later medieval homes. That position wasn't aesthetic, it was strategic. The hearth divided the hall into two living wings, giving equal warmth to both sides. More importantly, it represented balance, day and night, man and woman, family and guest. You can almost see how each ember carried meaning, light in the middle of endless dark. A woman crouches near the fire, turning a clay pot suspended by iron hooks. The aroma of broth, fish, leeks, and something earthy fills the air. Each hiss of boiling fat sounds like a soft sigh. She stirs with slow patience, the wooden ladle scratching gently against the rim. The hearth wasn't just a place to cook, it was the spiritual core of Viking life. Here they made offerings, whispered blessings, and told stories that stitched time together. In every saga, the hearth symbolized safety, the fragile warmth humans wrestled from a world that rarely cared if they lived or died. Curiously enough, traces of soot found in excavated longhouses show that the walls were deliberately blackened, not from neglect, but intention. Soot acted as a crude weatherproofing layer, filling gaps and sealing wood fibers. The darker the walls, the better the insulation. Imagine centuries of smoke slowly painting protection onto timber. What might look filthy to us was, for them, a sign of clever survival. You shift closer to the flames, feeling the waves of heat brush your cheeks. The fire burns not in roaring brightness but in quiet control. That's important. Too much flame meant wasted fuel, and every log here was precious. The Vikings cut and dried wood months in advance, oak for endurance, birch for a quick spark, pine for resin-rich flame. You can hear the difference in the crackle, the subtle change in sound when one kind gives way to another. The scent shifts too. Birch smoke is sweet, pine sharp and biting. Some researchers continue to debate if these fires ever truly went out in winter. One theory says the embers were kept alive continuously, fed just enough to glow through the night. Another suggests they banked the fire with ash, letting it sleep until morning. Either way, the symbolism endured. If the hearth still burned, the household still lived. Extinguishing it meant misfortune or worse, the end of a family line. You glance up toward the smoke hole, barely visible in the gloom. It's framed by a triangular vent cut into the roof ridge, now thick with snow. Every so often, the wind forces a few flakes through, swirling them into the warm air until they melt in mid-flight. The roof beams above are streaked with resin, glistening faintly like wet bark. The Vikings may not have had chimneys, but they understood airflow in a way that feels almost instinctive. They designed the roof to draft the smoke just enough, keeping the upper air thick but breathable. It meant they could trap warmth, using the haze as an invisible blanket. Few people realized that these smoky interiors even helped preserve the house itself. The constant layering of soot and resin made the wood more resistant to rot and insects. What we'd call poor ventilation, they would call intelligent decay prevention. It's strange how the line between discomfort and innovation can blur when survival's the only goal. You stretch your legs toward the fire, feeling the grainy heat ripple through your boots. Around you, the others begin to settle for the night. Some roll out furs near the walls, others curl up on raised platforms. Children lie closest to the hearth, old folk nearest the door, both for reasons of practicality. Warmth flowed outward from the center, but so did danger. A spark could set pelts aflame, and someone had to guard against that. Sleep here wasn't careless, it was ritualized vigilance. The fire's glow throws long shadows that dance across faces and fur. You notice the gleam of sweat on a man's temple, the way the light pools in the curve of a woman's braid. There's a quiet dignity in their stillness, a kind of calm earned only through endless repetition of hard seasons. This isn't coziness, it's resilience disguised as peace. A low hum rises, someone begins to sing. The melody is slow, circular, ancient. It seems to echo the rhythm of the fire itself. You don't recognize the words, but the tone is unmistakably one of gratitude. Gratitude for warmth, for shelter, for one more night survived. Outside, the wind claws at the walls, but you no longer flinch. You feel what the Vikings must have felt, a deep trust in the structure around you, in the craft of human hands against impossible odds. Inside this hall, the snowstorm is merely a rumor. The woman by the fire ladles out portions of soup, handing each to those still awake. The taste is simple, almost bland, but after hours in the cold it's ambrosia. The salt stings your lips, the steam coats your face, and the warmth seeps down to your stomach like liquid sunlight. You realize that the hearth was never just about heat, it was about nourishment, connection, and continuity. Each bowl passed hand to hand was a reaffirmation. We live, we share, we endure. Above the fire, a bundle of herbs crackles as someone tosses it into the coals. The smell of thyme and juniper bursts into the air, bright and sharp, cutting through the smoke. It feels cleansing, almost ceremonial. The woman smiles faintly, murmuring something about keeping away frost spirits. The others nod, as if it's obvious. In a world where winter could erase a village, superstition was simply another form of logic. The fire quiets again, glowing like a heartbeat beneath its blanket of ash. You lie back, letting your eyes drift toward the rafters. The smoke swirls lazily, a slow ghost dancing between beams. You breathe it in, your chest heavy, your limbs drowsy. It's almost comforting, this shared smoky air. It smells of life preserved by compromise, a soft balance between light and darkness. As you close your eyes, the longhouse exhales, wood creaking gently, the storm whispering outside. The hearth's last sparks blink like stars. And in that half-sleep between warmth and cold, you understand, every ember is a promise, glowing quietly against oblivion. The storm presses harder against the longhouse walls, but you hardly notice anymore. Inside, the fire has mellowed to a red heart of coals, humming low and steady. The air is thick, fragrant with smoke and animal warmth. You shift slightly, your back pressed against a wooden frame, a sleeping platform, sturdy and surprisingly comfortable for something carved with an axe centuries before your time. According to excavations carried out in Norway and Denmark, these sleeping platforms were usually built from timber planks and packed earth. They stood just a little higher than knee level, enough to stay clear of the damp floor and catch the warmth rising from the central hearth. Each platform could hold several people at once, often entire families, lying shoulder to shoulder beneath layers of fur and wool. The edges were lined with rough beams to keep bedding from sliding off, and sometimes carved with patterns of knots or spirals, a touch of pride amid practicality. You run your fingers over the uneven grain of the plank. It's cool to the touch, though the furs piled atop it radiate stored heat. Reindeer hide, sheep fleece, fox pelt. Every surface here seems to have once belonged to something that walked, breathed, and survived the same cold that now howls outside. You sink into the pile, feeling the soft bristle of fur against your cheek. It smells faintly of smoke, tallow, and life. Few people realize that Viking bedding wasn't just random layers of hides. Beneath the furs, they often spread dried seaweed, straw, or moss to create insulation and absorb moisture. When you think of it, it's ingenious nature's version of a thermal mattress. And when the materials grew too damp or smelly, they were burned for kindling, leaving behind nothing wasted. A young man nearby adjusts his bedding, his movements slow and deliberate. He lays a woolen cloak over himself, tucking the edges under his legs. You notice how the layers overlap, like the shingles of a roof fur against skin, wool over fur, linen on top. He grins faintly, as though he knows you're watching, and says something about how even the gods would envy a warm bed. You laugh softly, and he chuckles back before turning to face the wall, already half asleep. Most scholars agree that the Vikings treated warmth as a communal affair, not a private luxury. Privacy was scarce in a longhouse, personal space, a concept that hardly existed. People slept close family, servants, sometimes guests, sharing body heat as naturally as they shared food or stories. It was not affection so much as physics, an unspoken pact with survival. An unexpected detail unearthed in Icelandic farmsteads shows that sometimes these platforms were filled with heated stones before nightfall. The stones, pulled from the fire and wrapped in linen, were slipped beneath layers of bedding to radiate slow warmth through the night. Primitive hot water bottles, centuries before the term existed. You picture it now, a child sighing in relief as the heat seeps into his toes, while outside the blizzard rages unchecked. You shift onto your side, the wooden beam pressing lightly against your shoulder. The platform creaks, a soft groan that blends with the murmur of sleeping voices. It's astonishing how alive this place feels, even in stillness. The longhouse breathes in rhythm with its people. A low chorus of snores and sighs fills the dark like a lullaby carved in wood and smoke. The firelight flickers against the beams overhead, revealing soot-dark patterns like constellations. You can almost trace them with your eyes, marks of years of burning, stories written in carbon. The Vikings would sometimes paint these beams with animal blood or pitch to darken them further, strengthening their resistance to damp. There's something strangely intimate about that. Wood and life fused together, holding the weight of sleep. Experts remain divided on whether these beds were truly soft or merely bearable. Some point to remnants of straw-filled mattresses found near burial sites, surprisingly sophisticated, layered with herbs such as yarrow or thyme to repel insects. Others believe the rough planks and furs were all they had. Perhaps, as so often in Viking life, the truth sits somewhere in between. Enough comfort to rest, but never enough to forget hardship. You adjust your own position, listening to the distant moan of wind curling through the roof vent. The warmth of the furs begins to cradle you, and you understand how crucial these sleeping platforms were. Not merely places to lie down, but sanctuaries of warmth, carved from endurance and ingenuity. In the cold north, even sleep was a crafted art. There's a faint sound near your feet, a dog shifting in its sleep, paws twitching as it dreams of hunting. You smile at the thought. In many Norse households, dogs slept at the foot of their owners' beds, both guardians and heaters. Their steady breathing fills the air with a quiet comfort that no fire could match. Outside, the wind changes pitch, a long wail rising then fading, like the voice of the sea itself. Inside, the world narrows to warmth and breath. The packed earth beneath the floor feels distant now, the cold forgotten. The longhouse, for all its roughness, has become a cocoon, half human, half nature, whispering the same secret it has told for 1,000 winters: survive together, or not at all. You reach out one last time, your fingers brushing the fur. It's coarse, uneven, imperfect, but it's enough. Enough to hold the night at bay. Enough to remind you that comfort is never a gift, it's something built, earned, and fiercely kept alive. The coals shift in the hearth, glowing faintly like watchful eyes. A log pops, scattering a shower of sparks that drift upward into the haze, like tiny souls ascending toward the roof beams. For a heartbeat, you think of all those who have slept on planks like these farmers, sailors, children, chieftains, and how each breath, each dream was another act of quiet defiance against the cold. The furs envelop you, their weight gentle and reassuring. The longhouse sighs again. Wood settling, wind circling. You close your eyes. The storm outside can howl all it wants. In here, the fire still lives. The night stretches on, soft and endless, while the longhouse murmurs in its sleep. The fire has sunk to a bed of glowing coals, its light licking faintly across the packed earth. You lie half awake, listening to the quiet rustle of wool and fur, the gentle breathing of people cocooned together beneath heavy blankets. There's an intimacy to it, one that feels ancient, humble, and deeply human. Most surviving Norse textiles suggest that the Vikings were masters of layering, not because they chased luxury, but because layering was science, the difference between frostbite and life. Wool, spun from sheep raised on rough northern pastures, was their secret weapon. It was coarse, dense, and naturally water-resistant, trapping air like a second skin. Beneath that came linen cooler, softer, made from flax beaten and spun until it shone faintly like pale thread. The combination created what we might call primitive climate control. You lift the edge of a wool blanket and let it fall. It lands with a soft weight, smelling faintly of lanolin and smoke. The air beneath it is warmer, calmer, like a captured sigh. Archaeological finds in Denmark and Iceland confirm that wool was the backbone of Viking life, used not only for clothing but for sails, bedding, even wall hangings. To weave was not a pastime, it was survival. Entire families depended on the steady rhythm of the loom. Curiously, the Vikings preferred darker dyes for their winter bedding. Deep browns, rusty reds, muted greens, not only because those colors hid soot and dirt, but because they absorbed heat better in dim light. A small, practical wisdom passed down through generations of women who spun and dyed by firelight. The hues still glow faintly under the flicker of embers, a palette born from earth and endurance. You glance toward the loom at the far end of the hall. Its wooden frame casts long shadows, the threads shimmering slightly in the firelight. It's silent now, but you can imagine the music it once made, the thunk of the beater, the whisper of yarn sliding through fingers, the steady heartbeat of creation. In a world where every fiber was handmade, each blanket carried the rhythm of its maker. Sleep itself was wrapped in the sound of labor. According to the sagas, the women of the household, often the matriarchs, ruled the domestic realm with quiet authority. They kept the keys to the food stores, decided how much wool to spin, and oversaw the distribution of bedding during the coldest nights. Warmth was power, and power here was feminine. You can picture her now, the lady of the house, standing by the fire, checking each blanket before the storm sets in, making sure her family will survive the night. A rarely mentioned fact from textile studies: Viking blankets were sometimes felted after weaving. That meant soaking them, beating them, and drying them, until the fibers matted together into a denser, almost waterproof fabric. The process was exhausting but effective. The result trapped heat far better than loose weave, and if it grew too stiff, it could be softened again by rolling it with animal fat. Imagine that ritual before bed, massaging warmth into cloth with oil from the very creatures that shared their home. You stretch slightly, the furs rustling beneath you. The sensation of warmth on your skin is so complete it almost feels liquid. There's something hypnotic about the rhythm of sleep here: breath, crackle, silence, repeat. And yet, even as you drift, the scholar in you wonders, how did they ever manage to stay clean in such smoky, shared quarters? Experts remain divided on whether bedding was regularly washed or merely aired out. Some suggest they sprinkled crushed herbs, juniper, mint, or thyme between layers to fight insects and odor. Others think the constant smoke did the job well enough, coating everything with a faint antiseptic layer of ash. You smile at the thought that a little soot might have been their version of detergent. The man across from you stirs, pulling his wool cloak tighter. The fabric shifts with a sound like rustling leaves. You can tell the cloak is thick, woven from double-ply yarn, the kind that shrugs off snow like it's nothing. Vikings often slept in their day clothes, cloaks and all. To undress was to court death. In the bitterest cold, even removing a belt could mean losing precious body heat. You imagine it now: men and women crawling beneath shared covers, still wearing tunics, leggings, boots half-laced. The line between waking and sleeping, between dressed and undressed, blurred by necessity. Few people know that Viking tunics were designed with overlapping panels in front, creating natural insulation around the chest. It wasn't fashion, it was armor against the wind. The same principle guided their blankets: overlap, trap, layer. Every seam had purpose. Even the weave density changed with the seasons: tighter in winter, looser in summer. No detail left to chance. The fire sighs, sending up a final flare before sinking again. You notice how quickly the air cools. The Vikings must have known this feeling well, the delicate balance between comfort and cold. They never let the fire die. Not completely. Someone, always someone, was responsible for tending it. A rotating duty, perhaps, or an unspoken kindness, the light sleeper's gift to the rest. You roll onto your back, staring at the dark beams above. The shadows sway like gentle waves, hypnotic, endless. The smell of wool, fur, and pine tar fills your senses, earthy, animal, alive. There's a lesson buried in that scent, that warmth isn't sterile, that safety is rarely clean, and that survival often smells like the things we've tamed and lived beside. Researchers who study Norse domestic life often remark that these sleeping spaces blur the line between human and natural worlds. The materials wool, hide, wood, moss, all part of the same ecosystem, repurposed with respect. To the Vikings, sleep wasn't an escape from nature. It was a nightly surrender to it. You sense that truth now, wrapped in furs that still whisper of snowfields and breath. The last ember cracks softly, sending a brief pulse of light through the longhouse. For a moment, everyone's faces glow, children, elders, warriors alike, each lost in the same fragile dream of warmth. Then the glow fades, leaving only the faint hum of shared breathing. You pull the blanket closer to your chin, sighing as the wool molds to your shape. Somewhere beyond the walls, the wind still roars, but its fury feels far away, softened by layers of wood, earth, and woven thread. Inside this cocoon of fabric and faith, the night belongs to you. The longhouse is nearly silent now, save for the steady rhythm of sleeping breath and the faint pop of settling embers. The air has cooled just enough to raise goosebumps on your arms, but not enough to chase away comfort. The warmth that remains isn't just from the fire it radiates from bodies, close and familiar, pressed together beneath shared blankets. According to surviving Norse poems and early Christian chronicles, sharing a bed in Viking times wasn't considered shameful or intimate. In the modern sense, it was common sense. The cold didn't care about propriety. A guest arriving after nightfall might be offered space beside the family, and no one blinked. The line between survival and scandal didn't exist when frostbite waited just outside the door. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the man sleeping near your feet. His breath is steady, deep. The woman beside him murmurs something in her dreams, her voice blending with the soft rustle of hides. There's a strange comfort in it, this closeness, a shared heartbeat that fills the dark. Even in sleep, everyone seems connected, as though the entire household breathes as one creature. Curiously, there are records from medieval travelers describing how strangers might share a bed during long winter journeys. They called it heat-keeping, a practice so accepted that to refuse it could be seen as rude or foolish. Warmth was currency, trust, and treaty all at once. You can imagine two weary traders, strangers at dusk, lying back to back under a fur blanket, each pretending to sleep while silently thanking the other for existing. The air feels thicker now, warmer where bodies crowd close. It's not clean in the way modern air is clean, it's human, full of sweat and smoke and life. The smell should be overwhelming, yet somehow it isn't. It's grounding. This is what safety smelled like in the Iron Age. Archaeological studies suggest that even large longhouses were often home to 20 or more people. Imagine that 20 bodies plus dogs, goats, and sometimes a cow or two, all sleeping within arm's reach of one another. No wonder the temperature stayed bearable. The body heat alone could raise the room by several degrees, enough to keep frost from forming on the walls. A living furnace powered by breath and heartbeats. A few experts remain divided on how much physical contact actually occurred. Some argue that families slept fully clothed, under layers so thick that skin never met skin. Others believe the opposite, that warmth was shared directly, especially among children and elders. Perhaps both were true, depending on the night, the household, or the desperation of the cold. It's the kind of detail that history rarely bothers to record, yet you feel it deeply now, here in the dark, pressed against another sleeper's shoulder. You shift your blanket slightly, and the motion stirs a child nearby. He opens one sleepy eye, mutters something about dreams of the sun, then curls back into the warmth of his mother's side. The scene feels timeless, a reminder that even the fiercest warriors were once children seeking warmth and comfort in the crook of someone's arm. An overlooked bit of Norse domestic tradition mentions that people sometimes sang softly as they settled into bed. Not lullabies exactly, but murmured chants, half prayer, half habit. They were meant to bless the night, to keep the frost spirits and restless dead at bay. The air would hum with those quiet tunes, weaving through breath and smoke. You can almost hear it now, a low hum, rhythmic as waves against the shore, vibrating through firs and hearts alike. Few modern people realize how differently the Vikings understood sleep. It wasn't solitary or private, it was communal, a shared threshold between life and something other. The warmth of others didn't just protect the body, it steadied the soul. Dreams were powerful, prophetic things, and to dream near others meant safety in the unseen world. You can sense that belief lingering here. The woman beside you shifts, sighing in her sleep, her arm brushing yours. It's not a gesture of affection, just proximity, instinctive, simple. Her skin is warm, her breath soft against your sleeve. You close your eyes again and listen to the layered sound of breathing, the slow, staggered rhythm that feels both individual and collective. It's hypnotic, like waves under ice. According to some sagas, warriors on campaign would do the same, lying side by side under cloaks, forming long rows of sleeping bodies in the snow. The youngest were placed in the center, where heat gathered, the elders on the outer edges, ready to wake first if danger came. The same principle governed life at sea. On longships, men slept so close that their shoulders brushed even when turning. The cold could turn a careless sleeper into a corpse before dawn. And yet, within that proximity lay something profound, a sense of shared endurance. To live in the north meant to trust the people beside you completely, even in dreams. You could not survive without them. A small, half-forgotten Norse proverb drifts into your mind. One scholars have translated roughly as, "The warmth of others is the hearth of the soul." You don't remember where you read it, but it fits perfectly here. You can feel it in your bones, in the quiet pulse of the hall around you. Someone at the far end of the longhouse coughs, stirs, and tosses a log onto the fire. The flames rise briefly, washing everyone in gold before retreating again into embered calm. The light skims across faces, peaceful, weathered, ordinary. You wonder how many centuries of nights like this the North has seen, how many storms were defied by the simple act of sleeping together. The fire hums, the bodies breathe, and the blizzard outside loses its edge. You realize the Vikings didn't conquer the cold, they outwitted it. Warmth, to them, wasn't luxury, it was community. Every shared blanket, every pressed shoulder, was a quiet rebellion against the silence of frost. The woman beside you murmurs again, half awake, half dreaming. You don't understand her words, but the tone is soft, grateful perhaps, or just content. You pull the blanket a little higher, close your eyes, and breathe with the hall one steady heartbeat in a house built to survive. Morning comes slowly in the Viking north. Not with sunrise, the sky is still dark, but with the faint lifting of the blackness above the longhouse roof. The air has turned cooler, the fire now a shallow bed of coals glowing through ash. You stir under the firs, stretch an arm, and touch something coarse and warm. A sheep's flank, perhaps. The animal exhales a sleepy snort, unbothered. It takes a moment before you realize the animal's never left. They've been here all night, only a few planks away. The partition between people and livestock is little more than a wooden half-wall, built chest-high and stuffed with straw. And strangely enough, the smell isn't unbearable. It's just earthy, heavy, full of life. Contemporary accounts from early medieval travelers describe these byres inside Viking longhouses as the secret to northern survival. Cows, goats, and sheep were not just property, they were heat generators. Each animal gave off enough warmth to raise the temperature of the hall by several degrees. Multiply that by 10 or 15 beasts, and suddenly the blizzard outside felt very far away. A small detail from Icelandic farm excavations reveals that these byres were cleverly designed with sloping floors, allowing liquid waste to drain toward a pit outside. That design, humble as it seems, kept the air breathable and reduced illness, a rare touch of sanitation in a world still centuries away from plumbing. You sit up and watch a cow twitch its ear in the firelight. Its eyes reflect the red glow like molten amber. There's a rhythm to their breathing, steady and slow. The sound fills the hall like the purring of a great beast. You realize now that this was the Vikings' true central heating system, a living, breathing partnership between man and creature. Few people realize how carefully balanced that coexistence was. Animals didn't simply share the house, they defined its architecture. The human sleeping platforms were always built higher than the byre floor, both to keep clean and to let the heat from the animals rise naturally toward the living space. The result was an unintentional yet effective gradient of warmth. Cows below, families above, and the fire between them like the sun in miniature. A lingering debate among historians concerns whether this setup was purely practical or carried spiritual meaning. Some argue that keeping animals indoors reflected a sacred closeness to Freya, god of fertility and harvest. Others see it as simple pragmatism in a place where temperatures could kill within an hour. You suspect it was both necessity clothed in reverence. The Vikings were nothing if not masters of blending survival with symbolism. You swing your legs over the edge of the sleeping platform, feeling the packed earth beneath your bare feet. It's surprisingly dry. The straw scattered across it rustles softly, warmed by the collective heat of the hall. You crouch beside the partition, resting a hand on the wooden beam separating you from the animals. The timber is warm to the touch, as if alive. According to early Norse farm records, each family knew the exact count of their animals not just by name but by the warmth they produced. They would speak of a 2-cow house or a 6-goat winter, as if measuring not wealth but comfort. A house without livestock was a cold one, literally and figuratively. The man tending the fire at the center of the hall stirs the ashes, adding a few splinters of birch. The sweet scent of resin drifts upward. Around him, the household begins to wake. Someone yawns. A child giggles. A goat sneezes a short, ridiculous sound that makes everyone laugh quietly. It's hard not to smile. The humor, the warmth, the noise, all of it feels like proof of life. Curiously, some sagas even mention that animals were occasionally used as nighttime sentinels. A restless cow, it was said, could sense a storm or danger before any human did. When the beasts stirred, so did the people. In that way, the longhouse became an ecosystem, part farm, part fortress, part family. You notice now that the roof above the animal section is lower, built deliberately that way to trap heat. The air feels thicker here, heavier with moisture. It's not unpleasant, just dense, like breathing through wool. Steam rises faintly from the cows' backs where the morning chill meets their body heat. It curls upward in ghostly ribbons, joining the smoke that still drifts lazily toward the vent. A seldom-told detail from Greenlandic settlements notes that some longhouses even used the animals' waste for fuel. Dried manure, when mixed with peat, burned slow and steady. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. You picture it, a farmer kneeling by the fire, feeding it with the very stuff produced by the creatures that warmed him at night. A perfect cycle, nothing wasted, everything repurposed. The fire grows stronger. The smell of burning peat and hay fills the air, sharp and earthy. Someone begins to stir a pot hung over the flames. Breakfast, the faint aroma of milk and barley porridge rises, mingling with the musk of livestock and smoke. You think about how intertwined these scents are: food, fuel, fur. To modern noses, it might seem crude. To a Viking, it meant safety, continuity, and warmth. Some researchers still puzzle over whether Viking homes were cleaner than we assume. The combination of smoke, straw, and animal heat created a self-sterilizing environment of sorts. Parasites didn't thrive easily in smoke-saturated air. The ammonia from waste may even have discouraged pests. What sounds unpleasant may, ironically, have been healthier than many medieval stone castles. You glance around. The longhouse glows in soft amber light now, the dawn outside a pale smudge against the door. The animals shift, hooves thudding gently against the packed earth. Children chase each other quietly, laughing under their breath. You feel a sudden affection for this life, this blend of grit and grace, of hard necessity softened by shared humanity. You crouch again, resting your forehead against the partition. The wood smells faintly of milk and resin. The cow on the other side exhales, its breath warm against your cheek. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling that heat, that slow pulse of survival. When you open them again, the fire has caught fully. The hall fills with light. The longhouse breathes deeply, alive and complete, beast and human. Smoke and wood, all bound together under one roof against the endless snow. In this strange harmony, you see the quiet brilliance of the Viking mind, to turn necessity into companionship, to make warmth from life itself. As the fire brightens and the day begins to murmur awake, the air inside the longhouse takes on its familiar haze, blue-grey ribbons of smoke drifting lazily beneath the rafters, softening everything they touch. You stretch, cough once, and feel the sting of soot in your throat. It's not pleasant, but somehow it feels right. The smoke belongs here, as much a part of life as air or bread. Archaeological remains from settlements like Borg in Lofoten and Jarlshof in Shetland reveal thick, layered soot clinging to the roof beams, evidence of centuries of constant fire. To the untrained eye, it looks like neglect, but to the people who built these halls, it was insulation. Every layer of carbon-sealed microscopic gaps in the wood, making the roof more airtight. Each winter, another smoky blanket formed above them, and with it, another degree of warmth saved from the cold. You rise slowly and step toward the center hearth. The coals are buried beneath a skin of grey ash. A woman crouches beside it, blowing gently through a hollow reed to wake the embers. They flare orange, flickering like eyes opening. The smell that follows is familiar now: sweet pine, earthy peat, and the faint sourness of dried dung used as fuel. The smoke thickens immediately, curling upward before spreading in lazy spirals across the rafters. Few people today realize how deliberately smoky these halls were kept. Modern logic screams for ventilation, but Viking sense whispered restraint. Let too much smoke out, and the warmth fled with it. Let too little escape, and the air turned deadly. Finding that balance was an art, taught through generations, learned by instinct rather than measurement. You feel it now, the layering of temperatures within the space. Kneel close to the fire, and you sweat. Stand tall, and the smoke stings your eyes. Somewhere in between, there's comfort. Every Viking must have known exactly where that invisible line lay, adjusting their posture, their breathing, their lives around the invisible choreography of smoke and heat. An old Norse saying recorded in a 13th century manuscript goes something like this: "Smoke in the eyes is better than frost in the bones." It's easy to see why. The longhouse wasn't meant for perfection, it was meant for survival. And in this strange equilibrium of discomfort, the Vikings found warmth where others might have found suffocation. You glance up toward the vent in the roof. A pale shaft of light pierces through, illuminating the smoky air like liquid silver. Snow has crusted around the opening, shaping it into a delicate ring of ice. Each time the fire flares, a tiny puff of smoke escapes, twisting into the morning wind before disappearing. It's mesmerizing, like watching breath itself leave the house. Interestingly, researchers studying preserved soot deposits in Iceland have discovered something unexpected: traces of plant oils and animal fat mixed into the carbon layers. That suggests the Vikings may have occasionally rubbed their beams with fat, not just to darken or seal them, but to help the soot stick. Imagine that, greasing your ceiling to trap more smoke, all in the name of warmth. Ingenious, if a little grimy. You breathe in again. The smoke scratches at your throat but warms your lungs. There's an odd comfort in it, the way the smell clings to hair and fabric, becoming part of you. You can tell who slept indoors by their scent: pine resin, wood ash, and a faint note of earth. Outside, you'd smell of snow and wind. Inside, you smell of survival. Some modern historians still debate how ventilation was managed in larger halls. Without chimneys or windows, the only escape routes were the roof vent and the open doorway. Some suggest a secondary vent near the gable ends. Others believe the entire roof was designed to breathe, flexing slightly in storms to pull air through gaps. Whatever the case, it worked. These houses didn't collapse under smoke, they thrived within it. A little-known observation from 19th-century ethnographers studying Icelandic turf houses, descendants of Viking design, describes how people actually missed the smoke when chimneys were introduced. It kept the ghosts away, they said. The soot-black ceilings felt protective, holy even. Smoke, it seemed, wasn't just warmth, it was spirit. A barrier between the living and the cold, the hearth and the void. The woman tending the fire hums softly, her face illuminated in the glow. The smoke swirls around her like a living thing, rising in thin threads that catch the light. She coughs, wipes her eyes, and laughs. There's no resentment in it. The discomfort is familiar, accepted, even loved. You can almost hear her ancestors whispering approval through the rafters. You look around at the others, some still wrapped in furs, others rising to start their chores. Their movements are slow but practiced, unbothered by the haze that would send modern lungs reeling. Children play with small wooden figures near the fire, eyes squinting through the smoke but untroubled. It's strange how quickly you, too, have adapted. The first breath of this air burned. Now it soothes. An unexpected benefit of all this smoke, according to environmental archaeologists, was preservation. Meat hung high above the fire, dried and cured naturally, forming the earliest version of smoked storage. The ceiling of a Viking home wasn't just a roof, it was a pantry, a smokehouse, a shield. When storms lasted for weeks, the food above their heads fed them through. Every detail, every whiff of smoke, carried purpose. You move closer to the door and lift the heavy wooden latch. A sharp gust of wind rushes in, swirling the smoke outward. The sudden clarity stings your eyes, but the cold that follows is worse biting, merciless. You close the door quickly, laughing under your breath. No wonder they preferred the haze. Better a little sting in the lungs than the deathly silence of frost. As the hall resettles, you realize how perfectly balanced this world is. Fire, smoke, air, breath, too much of any, and life falters. But together, they weave a fragile peace that lasts through endless winters. You return to your place near the hearth. The coals pulse like a heart, the smoke rises like thought, and you, one more living thing among many, breathe in, slow and deep. The air tastes of ash and life, the essence of warmth captured and made visible. The storm outside can rage as long as it pleases. In here you have fire, smoke, and the wisdom of 1,000 winters curling softly above your head. The morning deepens into a grey, muted noon. No sunlight pierces the clouds outside. The blizzard has dulled the world into one long twilight. Yet inside the longhouse, a different warmth hums to life, one brewed, poured, and shared in laughter. Someone ladles a thick amber liquid into a wooden cup and presses it into your hand. The smell of honey and malt rises, heady and sweet. Most surviving Norse sagas mention this ritual as casually as breathing, the drinking of ale or mead by the hearth, even in daylight. Not drunken revelry, but a steady, warming rhythm of life. Alcohol here wasn't luxury, it was fuel. Brewed from barley, water, and wild honey, mead offered calories, hydration, and courage, all in one cup. You take a sip. It's stronger than you expect, sweet at first but sharp beneath, like fire caught in syrup. The warmth spreads quickly down your throat, flooding your stomach and chest. It's an illusion, of course the heat is internal, temporary, but on nights when frost scraped the doorframe, that illusion could mean survival. According to the writings of Adam of Bremen, a German chronicler who visited the north around the 11th century, Vikings drank their warmth. He meant it as an insult, but there's truth in it. Alcohol dilates blood vessels, drawing heat to the skin, dangerous if you're exposed, but perfect if you're sealed within a turf-walled house with fire and furs. The warmth might fade after an hour, but by then, sleep had already claimed them. Curiously, archaeologists found small ceramic vessels buried near ancient hearths, likely used to warm drinks before bed. Picture it, a woman kneeling by the fire, heating mead over embers until it steamed faintly, then passing it to her family like liquid comfort. The smell alone, sweet honey and wood smoke, must have made the cold retreat for a while. You take another sip, and the room feels a little softer, the light a little thicker. Conversations drift lazily through the air. Low laughter, a cough, a child's giggle. The mead uncoils the stiffness in your shoulders, loosens your tongue. Across the fire, two men are trading stories in rhythmic bursts of words. Their voices rise and fall, echoing off the beams like waves against cliffs. One of them claps his cup down and grins. "Better to die with a full belly," he says, "and a warmer heart than an empty one." The others murmur in agreement. You can tell it's not just a saying, it's a creed. To them, warmth isn't just a temperature, it's a state of spirit. Some researchers suggest that these nightly drinks helped regulate sleep. The mild buzz relaxed muscles, slowed breathing, and dulled the sharp awareness that comes from living too close to danger. In a world without thick walls or soft beds, mead became a lullaby in liquid form. It filled the silence between fire crackles and the wind's howl, turning fear into drowsy calm. Few people know that mead was often mixed with herbs, juniper for sharpness, yarrow for healing, even tiny amounts of henbane for its mild hallucinogenic warmth. It wasn't enough to harm just to soften the edges of thought. Imagine the dreams that must have followed, the strange glow of sleep tinted gold by honey and smoke. As you drink, the warmth spreads outward again. The world narrows pleasantly. The hall feels smaller, safer, wrapped in its own haze of laughter and steam. The fire glows through it all like a sun that refuses to set. Someone plucks at a lyre in the corner, a few hesitant notes, then a simple melody, circular and hypnotic. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. The tune shifts into a low hum, joined by several voices. No words, just sound and ancient vibration shared between throats and heartbeats. It feels almost medicinal. You wonder whether this too was part of the nightly ritual, to sing the cold away. A debated theory among cultural historians suggests that such songs had physiological effects, raising body temperature slightly through controlled breath and vibration. Modern scientists might scoff, but anyone who's ever sung around a fire knows the truth. It stirs something deeper than lungs. The Vikings, ever practical, may have known it too, even if they called it magic. Someone refills your cup. The mead catches the firelight and glows amber red. You swirl it slowly, watching the tiny bubbles rise and pop. The taste has mellowed now, sweet, smoky, grounding. It's not difficult to imagine how easily such nights turned into feasts, or feasts into sagas. Warmth breeds stories, and stories, like flames, need only breath to grow. A small girl, perhaps 6 or 7, toddles past clutching a smaller cup of watered ale. Her hair glows copper in the light. She sits beside her mother, who brushes smoke from her face and hands her a piece of dried fish. The child eats quietly, listening to the men's laughter. In that small, ordinary act, the sharing of food, warmth, and drink, you glimpse why this culture survived at all. A particularly odd discovery from one Viking burial site shows that mead cups were sometimes placed beside the dead, not for vanity, but for comfort on the journey to the next world. Even in death, warmth had to travel with you. It's both tender and practical, exactly what life here demanded. You lean back, feeling the last of the drink settle warmly in your stomach. The hall has fallen quieter now. The conversations have thinned into murmurs. The fire has dimmed to its steady orange glow. The smoke curls upward, soft and sleepy. Someone hums a final note that hangs in the air, fading only when the wind outside groans again. You close your eyes, the taste of honey still clinging to your lips. The Vikings didn't conquer their winters with comfort. They endured them with rituals like this. A cup of warmth, a story shared, a moment's laughter in defiance of the endless dark. You can feel that defiance even now, pulsing faintly through the smoky air. You lift your cup once more in quiet salute to fire, to honey, to breath that still steams in the cold. Then you drink. The warmth of the mead fades into a gentle hum beneath your skin. The hall settles again into its quiet rhythm, low murmurs, the shifting of furs, the occasional sigh of someone turning in sleep. Outside, the storm shows no sign of mercy. The wind claws at the wooden walls like an impatient guest. Inside, the fire glows faintly through its veil of ash, throwing just enough light to paint faces in shades of gold and shadow. You tug your wool cloak tighter and notice something. No one here has truly undressed. Even in sleep, their garments remain layered and snug, cloaks wrapped like cocoons. According to textile fragments preserved in Icelandic peat bogs, Vikings often slept fully clothed in winter, sometimes even keeping on their boots and belts. It wasn't laziness, it was logic. The moment you stripped down, the cold claimed your skin, and regaining that heat could take hours. You glance across the fire at a man half buried in pelts. He's wearing a thick tunic of felted wool and trousers bound at the ankles with strips of leather. His cloak is pinned with a simple iron brooch at the shoulder, the fabric coarse but dense. He looks as though he's ready to leap into battle or out into a snowstorm at any moment. Curiously, a few Norse sagas make passing mention of this habit, describing warriors who slept in their armor of wool. The phrase sounds poetic until you realize it's almost literal. Wool was their shield against the night. Its fibers, crimped like springs, trapped warm air close to the skin. Even damp, it kept its heat. Linen might have been the finer fabric, but wool was the faithful one, scratchy, stubborn, dependable. You pull your own cloak tighter and feel its weight, rough yet comforting. There's a rhythm to the way the fibers catch the skin, soft in one direction, coarse in another, like a living texture. Beneath it, your tunic clings lightly with the faint smell of smoke. The layers are warm, but more than that, they're grounding. It's as if the clothing itself remembers the hands that spun it, the sheep that grew it, the fires that hardened its color. Excavations in Swedish farmsteads have revealed wool garments reinforced with patches of leather around the elbows, knees, and chest. These weren't fashion statements, but survival gear designed for longevity. Vikings knew that once warmth escaped, it was nearly impossible to win back. Every seam mattered. They even wove windproof hems by tightening the weave near openings, an ancient version of thermal cuffs. Some scholars remain divided on whether these clothes were ever removed at night. Certain accounts suggest that only the uppermost cloak might be taken off, folded, and used as a pillow. Others believe they slept exactly as they lived, dressed for the cold, ready for dawn. Either way, the boundary between waking and resting was thin. Sleep wasn't about luxury. It was about conserving the fragile warmth you'd earned during the day. You glance at your hands. The skin is dry, cracked at the knuckles. But you notice something else. The air here never freezes solid, not like outside. The overlapping heat from fire, breath, and clothing has turned the hall into a strange equilibrium. Not warm enough to sweat, not cold enough to shiver, just balanced. A little-known custom recorded in early Scandinavian homesteads mentions that people often hung their outer garments from poles above the hearth overnight. The smoke cured the fabric, thickening it with soot and resin, making it more windproof with each passing week. What we might see as filth, they saw as armor. The darker your cloak, the better it served you in the snow. You shift your position, the furs beneath you rustling softly. Beside you, a woman adjusts her son's cloak, pulling it snug under his chin. The boy mumbles something incoherent and drifts back into dreams. You watch her hands rough, chapped, yet impossibly gentle. She knows instinctively that warmth is a craft. Every fold, Every layer is placed with purpose. A curious fact discovered from textile workshops near Ribe in Denmark. Vikings sometimes lined their cloaks with scraps of worn linen to create a micro-layer of trapped air. It didn't look pretty, but it worked. That quiet innovation, linen within wool, wool over hide, turned even the simplest garment into a fortress. You imagine how it must feel to crawl under these layers after a day spent outside, the weight of furs pressing close, the wool scratching lightly against skin, the familiar smell of smoke and salt. It's not comfort in the modern sense, it's survival turned intimate. Every piece of fabric here is a memory of effort. The sheep raised, the loom tended, the dye brewed. You hear someone whisper a short prayer to Thor, voice low and rhythmic. Keep the fire strong. Keep the frost away. The words aren't desperate, they're steady, almost routine. For them, warmth isn't taken for granted. It's a pact with the gods. And the gods, it seems, have to be reminded each night. A debated question among historians asks whether Vikings ever built their own sleeping suits, layered outfits dedicated solely to rest. So far, no such garments have been found. Perhaps, they argue, sleep didn't require something separate. It was simply another part of the day, lived in the same clothes, under the same weight of wool. You stretch your legs, feeling the stiffness of the day's cold, still caught in your muscles. The cloak shifts with you, falling over your shoulders like a shadow. Around you, the air carries the faint rustle of cloth, the sound of people moving quietly in their sleep. It's a lullaby of fabric, steady and soft. The fire pops once, spitting a tiny spark that lands harmlessly on the packed earth. You watch the ember fade, glowing faintly like the last eye of a dragon before sleep. There's a stillness now, the kind that only exists in deep winter, when even the wind outside seems tired of its own voice. You breathe deeply. The wool smells faintly of lanolin, earthy and clean. It feels alive, protective. You begin to understand why they never removed it. Warmth wasn't a gift to be borrowed. It was something you carried, lived in, became part of. As you close your eyes, you feel the layers pressing lightly against your chest and legs, each one a silent promise against the cold. You think of the generations who slept this same way, wrapped in smoke, wool and faith, the same darkness, the same fire, the same rhythm of breath beneath fur. Outside, the storm roars once more. Inside, your warmth endures not because of comfort, but because of craft. The wind has not tired. It prowls outside like a hungry creature, brushing against the wooden walls with muffled snarls. But here inside, you feel oddly safe. The longhouse breathes steadily. The fire hums beneath its crust of ash, and the air, though smoky, feels alive. You rise slowly, curious about what lies beyond these timbered walls. When you push the door open, the cold greets you like a slap, sharp and stunning. You step out into the snow. The world has become white silence, sky and ground fused into one endless horizon. The snow squeaks under your boots, dense and heavy, the kind that falls when the air itself seems exhausted. The cold bites instantly, yet strangely, it's not unbearable. The air is so dry, it feels crisp, almost clean. You blink, and snowflakes catch in your eyelashes, tiny needles of light. According to research on ancient Scandinavian winters, temperatures could drop below -30 degrees Celsius during the harshest months. Yet Viking families endured not by avoiding snow, but by learning to use it. Snow, paradoxically, became their ally. You trudge around the longhouse and notice the walls are buried halfway up in drifts. It looks like the structure is sinking, but it's the opposite, it's insulating. Thick layers of packed snow hug the turf roof and sides, sealing in heat. The weight compresses the air pockets in the turf, trapping warmth the same way down feathers do. A longhouse covered in snow was not a danger, it was a blessing. Few people realize that snow, properly packed, is a natural insulator. It's full of air, tiny, still chambers that slow the escape of heat. The Vikings knew this not by science, but by observation. When snow drifted against their walls, they left it there. Sometimes they even piled it deliberately, creating what we might call primitive thermal fortresses. You crouch, scoop up a handful of snow, and squeeze. It crunches faintly, compacting into a hard, glittering lump. Cold to the touch, yes, but only at first. Hold it long enough, and you can feel it dull, soften. Beneath that frozen surface lies trapped warmth, delicate and invisible. You imagine Viking children doing the same centuries ago, shaping snow walls and igloo-like shelters for play and practice, learning young how to read the cold. Evidence from Greenlandic settlements shows that Vikings sometimes built snow windbreaks outside entrances. These curved walls of ice and compacted snow deflected the worst of the wind, keeping the doorway calm. A clever touch. Instead of fighting nature, they redirected it. You can picture it now, the storm blasting past while the interior door opens to still, gentle air. Some environmental archaeologists remain divided on how deliberate this use of snow truly was. Did they consciously design for it, or simply adapt as the weather forced them to? Either way, the results were elegant. The longhouse became half architecture, half landscape, part of the frozen earth rather than separate from it. You look toward the horizon where the fjord should be, but it's invisible under the white. A few dark shapes move in the distance, perhaps sled dogs or reindeer. The air carries a strange, soft quiet. It's the silence of snow swallowing sound. Even your own breathing feels muted, as though the world is holding its breath with you. An unexpected observation recorded by Arctic explorers centuries later describes how even in sub-zero temperatures, snow shelters stay warmer inside than the air outside. Body heat alone can raise the interior to around freezing, an astonishing contrast when the outside world is far colder. The Vikings, without ever writing it down, had mastered the same principle long before. You walk along the edge of the house and see small vents cut low near the base air holes to keep smoke and moisture from building too much inside. They're half covered by snow now, the edges rimed with ice crystals like sugar. You brush them gently clear, and the air that escapes feels surprisingly warm, scented faintly of peat and smoke. The house exhales. Your breath fogs instantly. The cold bites through your layers, creeping between seams. You understand now why they kept their wool on, even to sleep. The body loses heat fastest when it's still, and sleep is the stillest thing of all. The furs and cloaks were more than coverings. They were barriers against the silence that eats warmth. You glance up. The roof gleams under a thick white shroud, each drift curved smooth by the wind. A raven lands on the ridge, black against white, its feathers puffed like armor. It tilts its head at you, curious, then lets out a throaty croak before taking off again, leaving a scattering of snow in its wake. The sound echoes once, twice, and disappears. You smile. Even the birds seem carved from this world of ice and patience. According to folklore preserved in later Icelandic texts, snow was thought to be both gift and curse, a cloak laid down by gods to hide the earth's wounds. When it fell, people spoke softly, afraid to disturb the sleeping ground. They said the snow listened, that it remembered footsteps. Whether superstition or poetry, it shows how intimately they knew the seasons, not as weather, but as presence. You crouch again, pressing your hand into the drift beside the wall. The snow squeaks faintly, compressing beneath your palm. Beneath the outer crust, it feels soft, almost spongy. The warmth from the house has melted and refrozen the innermost layer, creating a delicate skin of ice that traps everything inside. Ingenious, accidental insulation, a harmony between structure and storm. Modern scientists studying Arctic construction have proven what the Vikings learned through centuries of endurance. Snow doesn't always destroy, it protects. It's the ultimate paradox of the North. The very element that kills also saves, if you learn to read it. You stand, brushing frost from your gloves. The door behind you opens, and a wave of warm air escapes, curling steam-like into the cold. For a heartbeat, It looks like the house itself is sighing. You step back inside, closing the heavy wooden slab behind you. The air rushes thick around you, smoky and alive again. Inside, the fire has brightened, and the longhouse feels impossibly cozy now, almost sacred. You inhale the mix of peat, wool, and life. The storm can howl all it likes, it's just another blanket over the world. The Vikings, you realize, didn't just survive winter. They partnered with it, letting snow itself become part of their shelter. In their world, even ice had purpose. You settle back beside the hearth, brushing snow from your cloak. The warmth returns slowly, like trust rebuilt. You can hear faint laughter again, and for the first time, the blizzard outside feels distant, like the sea in a dream. The snow, it turns out, isn't an enemy. It's the quiet guardian of warmth. You shake the last dusting of snow from your cloak as you step back inside the longhouse, letting the door thud shut behind you. The shift in air is immediate, from razor-sharp cold to a dense, smoky warmth that clings to your hair and skin. The contrast almost makes you dizzy. You take a slow breath, and the air tastes of wood ash, peat, and something faintly metallic iron, perhaps, from the tools resting by the wall. According to archaeological digs in Iceland and the Faroe Islands, Viking homes were never built directly on bare earth. Beneath the visible walls and timbers lay a hidden architecture of turf layers of cut sod, stacked like bricks, thick enough to muffle the sound of wind and trap every breath of heat. From the outside, they looked like mounds sprouting from the frozen ground. From within, they felt like caves lined in green. The turf roof wasn't an afterthought. It was the first defense. You crouch by the wall, run your fingers along the seams where wood meets earth. The moss that fills the cracks is cool but pliant, like damp felt. It smells of soil and pine needles. Even now, centuries later, the design feels perfect. Timber ribs for structure, turf flesh for warmth. The earth itself is part of the house, half buried, half grown. Curiously, some of these turf homes survived for hundreds of years, long after their builders were gone. Excavations show the grass kept growing, knitting itself tighter over time. It's as if the land refused to let go of the human shapes carved into it. Few modern materials can boast such stubbornness. You stand, brushing your hands clean, and move toward a darker corner of the hall where the air feels cooler. A narrow passage leads downward, steeper than you expect. You crouch and follow it. The smell changes, damper, more mineral, almost like a cellar. At the bottom is a small chamber dug partly into the earth, lined with stones slick with condensation. This, you realize, is one of the secret hearts of Viking warmth, the earth cellar, or jarðhús. People used it to store food, yes, but on nights of merciless cold, they also slept here. The ground held a steady temperature just above freezing, far warmer than the air outside. Add a low fire pit and a few furs, and it became an underground refuge where life could outlast any storm. Written fragments from later Norse settlers in Greenland mention earth houses where the night winds forget us. It sounds poetic, but you can imagine the truth behind it. Men and women huddled beneath the ground, hearing the storm rage above, while the soil wrapped them in silence. The world reduced to heartbeat, breath, and the smell of damp clay. An unusual discovery in one Icelandic site showed signs of soot on the interior walls of such a chamber. That means fires really were lit below ground, dangerous, smoky, but possible thanks to narrow air shafts carved through the turf roof. The design worked because warm air always sought to rise. Even the smallest vent could pull smoke upward, leaving the rest of the space bearable. Some archaeologists remain divided on whether these subterranean shelters were built intentionally for winter sleeping or simply repurposed storage rooms. The evidence blurs together, ash here, grain there, a fragment of a broken lamp, but the pattern feels clear enough. When the frost grew too cruel, people retreated into the earth like hibernating animals. You can't help admiring the humility of it. The Vikings, fierce as they were, knew when to bow to nature, to live within it instead of against it. In these hidden rooms, they found not shame, but endurance. The warmth that saved them wasn't roaring firelight, but the slow, quiet heat of soil and stone. You crouch lower and rest your palm on the earthen wall. It feels strangely alive, cool, yes, but pulsing faintly with the memory of warmth. The soil breathes. The entire chamber feels like a heartbeat deep inside the world. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the people who once lay here, wrapped in furs, whispering stories into the darkness, listening to the muffled wind above. A curious fact from environmental studies notes that turf houses maintained an internal temperature around 5 degrees Celsius, even when the outside dropped far below zero. Combined with fire and shared body heat, that was more than enough for survival. The earth itself became a blanket, one that never ran out of fuel. You climb back toward the main hall, emerging once more into light and sound. The difference is startling. The longhouse feels huge and bright after that underground stillness. The fire crackles, and the air smells of roasted fish. Someone laughs near the hearth. You realize that above and below ground, warmth follows the same rule. Proximity. To the earth, to the fire, to each other. An often overlooked aspect of Viking architecture is how these turf layers muffled sound. The blizzard outside may still roar, but inside, it's only a low hum, like distant surf. That quiet mattered. In winter, when darkness lasted 18 hours or more, silence could unmake a mind. The turf's hush became a kind of medicine, soft, constant, and steady as breath. You settle onto a bench by the wall. The wood feels warm where it meets the sod. The snow above presses gently against the roof, making the air thick and still. You can hear the faint drip of melted frost trickling down through hidden channels, guided toward a drain trench at the edge of the floor. Nothing wasted, not even meltwater. Somewhere near the doorway, a man begins to repair a broken wall plank, wedging in new moss and clay. His hands move without haste, each motion precise. You watch him, realizing that maintenance here was never just building, it was prayer. Keeping the earth close, keeping the warmth in, keeping death politely outside. You take another slow breath. The smell of damp soil and smoke fills your chest, and you feel that quiet humility settle over you too. There's no grandeur in these walls, no marble, no glory, but there's something better. Belonging. For the Vikings, the earth was not an obstacle. It was the oldest ally, the first hearth, the final refuge. They did not fight the ground. They listened to it, shaped their homes from it, and slept inside its patient warmth until spring returned. As the fire pops, a few sparks drift upward, kissing the rafters before fading into the smoky dark. The sound is soft, almost tender. The earth below absorbs it, steady and calm. Outside, the storm may rule the world, but down here beneath turf and timber, the Vikings have already tamed winter. The air in the longhouse hums with new energy. The storm outside has eased just enough for sound to carry again, and from somewhere near the hearth, a man's voice rises steady, rhythmic, full of life. You lean closer, drawn to it. He's not shouting or preaching. He's telling a story. In the glow of the firelight, faces turn toward him, eyes glinting with anticipation. He gestures with one hand, the other resting on a cup of ale. The fire crackles in perfect time with his words, and the shadows of his listeners ripple like waves across the timbered walls. According to early Norse sagas, storytelling wasn't simply entertainment, it was endurance. The dark season could stretch endlessly, with the sun barely grazing the horizon. To keep the spirit alive, people turned to tales. Each night became a small rebellion against silence. Stories gave shape to the dark, warmth to the cold. You can hear it now, the steady pulse of his voice, deep and musical. He speaks of a fjord frozen solid, of warriors crossing the ice to find a lost chieftain's ring. His words hang in the smoky air like frost crystals, shimmering with tension. The children huddle close, wide-eyed, as the tale winds through danger and triumph. Curiously, researchers who studied Icelandic sagas found that many of these oral traditions were first composed during winters, exactly like this. One nights of confinement when families gathered close to share warmth and time. Memory became the hearth of the mind. Each storyteller held history itself in his breath. Few people today realize how structured these oral performances were. A good skald, poet, or bard didn't just improvise. He followed strict rhythms, half poetry, half chant, the pattern echoing the beat of the human heart. It's said the best could make listeners feel heat and cold just through words. As you listen now, you understand how that might be true. The man's tone lowers suddenly. He speaks of a sea god's wrath, of waves so high they swallowed stars. The hall falls silent except for the fire's murmur. You feel the air tighten, every ear straining toward him. Then he pauses perfectly, just long enough for tension to bloom, before laughing and breaking the spell. The room exhales. Laughter spills out, rich and relieved. Archaeological clues from Viking sites in Norway even hint that these gatherings were ritualized. Carved benches arranged in semicircles, hearths positioned precisely in the center. It's as if the architecture itself anticipated the act of storytelling. The fire became stage and heartbeat. Some scholars still disagree on whether these sagas were strictly male domains or shared equally among women. Certain accounts describe female storytellers, Seithkunur, who wove myth and magic together, half history, half prophecy. Perhaps, like warmth, storytelling belonged to anyone who could hold an audience through the long night. You notice the youngest listeners beginning to drift half asleep, but unwilling to miss a word. The flicker of the fire paints soft shapes across their faces. In this moment, you realize the genius of the tradition. Stories didn't just entertain, they hypnotized. They lulled the mind toward calm, made the cold irrelevant. The world beyond the walls could vanish, and only the voice remained. The man now speaks of a wolf the size of a longship, its breath freezing the sea as it howls. You can almost hear it in the wind outside, that echo of myth in the storm. For a heartbeat, the firelight flickers strangely, and even the adults shift uneasily. Then someone tosses a fresh log on the flames, and the shadows retreat. Everyone laughs again, the spell broken. An unexpected insight from modern linguists studying these tales suggests that rhythm itself carried physical warmth. Reciting verse required breath control, steady exhalation, and constant vocal vibration, all small acts that raised body temperature. In other words, telling stories literally kept you warm. The Vikings, without meaning to, had found a way to heat their nights with words. You sip the last of your drink, feeling that warmth echo in your chest. The storyteller continues, his tale turning now toward hope. He speaks of spring's first thaw, of rivers breaking free, of green returning to the valleys. Around you, faces soften. For just a moment, everyone seems to see it, the impossible image of sunlight glinting on water. In midwinter, even a spoken spring can warm the soul. The man's voice slows. His words become lower, quieter. The tale ends not in victory but in reflection. A warrior returning home, older, wiser, laying his sword beside the hearth. There's a brief silence when he finishes, the kind that feels almost sacred. Then comes a murmur of approval, and someone claps softly. You glance around the hall. The faces here are more than entertained, they're renewed. The story has burned through them like a shared fire, invisible yet real. You can sense the same pattern that repeats in every generation. Work, eat, tell, sleep. The endless rhythm of survival softened by imagination. A curious custom recorded in Old Norse manuscripts describes how, after each story, someone would mark the end with a toast, till Heiðr's Eldinum, to the honor of the fire. You hear it now, faint but sure, as one of the men lifts his cup. To the fire, he says, and everyone echoes it, their voices mingling with the crackle of wood. It's fitting, you think. The hearth gives heat, but stories give flame to the mind. Without either, the night would win. The storyteller leans back, his task done. Someone adds peat to the fire, and sparks whirl upward like tiny stars. The children finally surrender to sleep, their dreams probably filled with wolves and fjords and gold. The adults whisper, their voices low, gentle, content. Outside, the wind has calmed, its voice fading into a distant sigh. Inside, the hall glows faintly, more alive than ever. You close your eyes and listen to the last echoes of the story lingering in the air, like warmth that refuses to leave. In the frozen world of the North, words were as vital as fire, and every tale told was another spark against the dark. The hall quiets again, its walls still echoing with the rhythm of the tale. Only the fire speaks now, soft, steady, crackling like whispered applause. You stretch your legs toward the warmth, feeling your body sink deeper into the fur beneath you. The smoke curls lazily upward, and in that dim light, the sacred seems to blend with the ordinary. It's easy to forget where human ritual ends and divine protection begins. According to archaeological finds and preserved Norse texts, nightly life in the longhouse carried its own kind of ceremony. The Vikings didn't pray the way modern people do. Instead, they invoked. Every small act, adding a log to the fire, tightening a fur blanket, sharing a cup of mead, was a quiet conversation with unseen spirits. They believed the house itself had a guardian, a small presence called a vata, who watched over hearth and family alike. Before sleep, they would whisper gratitude, asking the spirit to keep the warmth alive until dawn. You can feel that habit lingering in the air, an old hush that falls when the chores are done and the cold presses close again. A woman near the hearth takes a wooden bowl, sprinkles a few drops of ale into the fire, and murmurs something under her breath. The flames answer with a hiss, and she nods, satisfied. The gesture is simple, but everyone around her relaxes slightly, as though the bargain with the night has been renewed. Curiously enough, some of the earliest Christian missionaries to the north wrote, half in awe and half in frustration, that Norse families seemed to pray to their walls. In truth, they were acknowledging the spirits that lived in wood and stone, the invisible warmth that made survival possible. When you sleep in a house built of earth and fire, it's easy to believe those elements have souls. Few people realize that even the layout of the longhouse reflected these beliefs. The central hearth wasn't just practical, it was sacred. Positioned along the spiritual axis of the home, it marked the line between human and divine. Every spark rising into the smoke hole was a message sent upward. In some places, offerings of bread or fat were placed at the edges of the fire, given to the household gods for luck and health. You can almost hear the murmur of those rituals now, woven seamlessly into conversation, as natural as breathing. A debated question among scholars concerns whether the Vikings viewed warmth itself as a form of divinity. Some argue it was merely metaphorical, a poetic way to describe protection and love. Others suggest the opposite, that heat, light, and the flicker of flame were living expressions of the gods. After all, in the Norse creation story, the world began when ice met fire. Perhaps to them, every hearth was a tiny echo of that first cosmic spark. The fire brightens briefly as another log catches, throwing wild light across the rafters. You can see faint carvings etched into the beams, spirals, runes, and simple animal forms. They're not decoration alone, they're wards. Old Norse farmers carved such symbols to invite good fortune and fend off what they called the cold spirits, forces of decay and misfortune that crept through cracks in the house as easily as wind. A line from the Havamal, the ancient Viking book of wisdom, comes to mind. Fire is the best gift for the cold traveler. It's not just advice, it's theology. Fire was divine generosity made visible. To share warmth was to honor the gods themselves. You feel that truth settling in your bones as you watch a man adjust the logs so the flame doesn't die. Even this act feels sacred. An unexpected detail found in some burial mounds suggests that small hearthstones were sometimes placed beside the dead, still blackened from years of use. It wasn't wealth they carried into the afterlife, it was warmth. That, above all, tells you how deeply the Vikings revered the idea of heat. It wasn't comfort, it was eternity. The woman who poured the ale now traces a rune on the soot-dark wall with her fingertip. You can't make out which one, but you guess it's for protection, perhaps. Algiz, the shape of outstretched arms. Her movement is slow, almost sleepy, as if she's writing warmth itself into the wood. You wonder if the spirits she speaks to still linger here, humming faintly in the grain of these timbers. The hall begins to quiet further. One by one, people settle into their beds. Someone hums softly, no words, just sound. A baby fusses briefly, then falls silent again, lulled by the rhythmic crackle of the fire. The air feels thick with peace, yet beneath it runs a kind of reverence, an understanding that warmth is fragile and must be guarded by both hands and heart. You think of the gods who ruled this land: Thor, the protector; Freyr, the bringer of harvest and fertility; and Bragi, god of poetry, whose voice warmed minds as fire warmed bodies. To these people, divinity wasn't distant. It lived right here, between ember and breath. Even the smoke that clouded their vision was a reminder, thin and shifting, like the boundary between worlds. Some historians have argued that this intimacy between faith and daily life helped the Vikings endure such brutal winters. Religion wasn't reserved for temples. It was built into every gesture: feeding the fire, tending animals, layering hides. All of it echoed the old pacts between humans and nature. Warmth was gratitude in motion. The woman finishes her rune and sits back, her eyes reflecting the glow. Someone mutters, "It will hold till morning," and she nods. Outside, the wind presses once more against the walls, a low moan that sounds almost human. The turf roof creaks but holds. The longhouse answers the storm like a great wooden beast, breathing, enduring, alive. You wrap your cloak tighter and close your eyes, letting the smell of smoke and wool fill your senses. The last thing you hear before drifting towards sleep is the faint pop of sap in the fire and the whisper of someone's prayer carried through the haze. Stay warm, stay here, stay living. In this place, faith and flame are one. Warmth isn't just survival, it's devotion. The hall has fallen quiet again, its mood softer, slower. The storm's rage outside has dwindled to a low sigh, like an old creature settling to sleep. The air inside feels thick with life-warm breath, soft snores, the lingering perfume of smoke and wool. You lie still, eyes half open, listening. It takes a moment to realize that what you hear isn't silence at all, it's the sound of many people breathing together. According to archaeologists who've studied the acoustics of Viking longhouses, the architecture itself amplified this gentle chorus. The curved roof beams and low ceiling caught sound and bent it back inward, creating a constant hum. Each inhalation and exhalation merged into a single rhythm, like waves lapping against wood. In a world that froze everything outside, this communal breathing was warmth made audible. You shift slightly, feeling the air pulse faintly against your skin. It's humid, surprisingly so. The shared breath of 20 bodies has thickened the air until it feels almost tangible, warm mist rising from human lungs. A strange comfort washes over you. The same air leaving your mouth becomes the warmth that brushes another's cheek. You're all part of one invisible fire. Few people today realize that humidity was essential for winter survival in such houses. Modern heating dries the air, but here, dampness meant life. Moist air held heat longer, trapped in the smoky haze that filled the rafters. It softened the cold, slowed evaporation from skin, and protected throats from cracking under icy drafts. You breathe in deeply, tasting the faint salt of sweat, the ghost of smoke, the breath of others, and feel safer for it. A small but telling detail from Icelandic excavation reports reveals layers of condensation residue along the beams of old longhouses, mineral white streaks left behind by centuries of human exhalation. It's eerie to imagine that breath could fossilize, that even now the walls carry traces of all those who slept and survived here. You can see how the air moves barely visible currents swirling above the fire. The draft from the smoke hole pulls upward, while every chest and nostril pushes out slow plumes of warmth. The patterns are hypnotic, like underwater currents seen through a flicker of light, its life circulating visibly, in rhythm with the hearth's low heartbeat. Some researchers remain divided on whether Viking builders fully understood this natural air system or stumbled upon it through trial and error. Whatever the truth, the balance is remarkable. The hearth's heat draws in cold air from cracks below the door, mixes it with the dense breath rising from sleepers, and exhales it as smoke through the roof vent. The result? A self-regulating climate, fragile but stable, as long as the fire never dies. You roll onto your back and watch the smoky ceiling sway with each gust of wind. It's strange, this sense of shared atmosphere. You're breathing the same recycled air as everyone else. Humans, dogs, maybe even the goat tied near the far wall. The realization should feel claustrophobic, yet it doesn't. It feels intimate, like belonging. A little-known Norse phrase carved into a rune stone in Uppland reads, Elder lifer meth monum. The fire lives with men. But you wonder if it could also mean the breath. Fire and breath, after all, are kin. Both are heat moving through space, both flicker and fade, both must be guarded carefully. You glance at the woman who drew runes earlier. She's asleep now, her chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of dream. The child beside her curls close, nestled under the same blanket. Their breaths rise together in tiny clouds that dissolve before reaching the rafters. You think of how every winter night must have looked the same, families turning the act of breathing into a communal ritual of endurance. Curiously, some 19th century Icelandic turf houses retained this practice long after modern chimneys appeared. People described feeling uneasy in rooms too airy, too coldly silent. They missed the human warmth that thickened the air, the scent of others nearby. Civilization might change the tools of comfort, but not its essence. You close your eyes, let the sound surround you, the overlapping rhythm of lungs, soft and uneven. You count the breaths, not out of restlessness, but out of awe. Each exhale is another thread in the fabric of this living shelter. You start to drift, lulled by the sound, but a faint memory tugs at you, a whisper from the old myths. In Norse creation stories, the first humans were given life not by flame or lightning, but by breath. Odin, Vili, and Ve found two pieces of driftwood on the shore and breathed into them, creating man and woman. Fire may warm the body, but breath animates the soul. Perhaps this too is why the Vikings revered the air of the longhouse. Within its smoky swirl lay proof of their divine origin. The fire crackles and someone stirs, adding another log. The air shifts slightly, carrying a new wave of heat across the room. You feel it wash over your face, mingling with the damp breath of the sleepers, the faint animal musk, the perfume of pine and soot. It's oddly comforting, this blend of elements, human, animal, earth, and sky, all condensed into one shared breath. A peculiar custom, noted in some sagas, mentions that when someone died during winter, their family kept the body inside until spring. Not out of neglect, but necessity. The ground was too frozen to dig. During those months, the dead were said to sleep among breaths, part of the same cycle of air and warmth. You shiver at the thought, not from fear, but from the closeness of it. Even in death, they belong to the house, to the warmth, to the rhythm. You inhale again, slow and deep. The air tastes of life, dense, warm, imperfect, and entirely human. You realize that here, in this smoky chamber, every exhale is both offering and inheritance. It's the most fragile heat, the one you carry inside, given and received with every breath. The hall creaks as the wind brushes the roof, a long, drawn-out sigh that sounds like the world breathing along. You close your eyes, syncing your rhythm with the others. For the first time, you understand, this isn't just sleep, it's communion. In the heart of the Viking winter, the greatest warmth wasn't fire or fur. It was breath shared, recycled, and alive, proof that even through the longest night, life continues to exhale against the cold. The night deepens again, folding over the longhouse like a thick woolen cloak. The hearth burns low, its glow the colour of molten honey, and shadows stretch across the sleeping forms clustered near the fire. A faint murmur breaks the quiet, a baby's cry, soft at first, then urgent, piercing through the smoky stillness. A woman stirs, sitting upright on one of the raised platforms. Her hair, loose from its braid, glints in the firelight as she leans over the small bundle beside her. The child's wail trembles through the hall. For a moment, even the dogs twitch in their sleep. Then she begins to hum a slow, low melody that rolls through the haze like a wave of warmth. According to skeletal evidence found in Norse burial sites, Viking infants were remarkably well cared for, especially in winter. Tiny bones show fewer signs of frost damage than those from other European populations of the same era. Survival rates were higher than you might expect for such a brutal climate. The reason, researchers say, lay not in miracles but in ingenuity. You watch the mother lift the child into her lap, wrapping him tighter in layers of wool and fur. She presses her cheek to his forehead, checking for warmth. The fire flickers across her face, tired but tender. Around her, no one complains about the noise. They simply stir, adjust their blankets, shift slightly closer to the fire. In this world, every cry is a reminder that warmth is still working, life still growing. Few people today realize how carefully Viking women designed their children's bedding. Excavations of ancient cradles show layers of fleece lined with moss or feathers, nature's best insulation. The moss wasn't just for softness. It absorbed moisture, keeping the baby dry even in the damp, smoky air. Linen strips bound it all together, forming cocoons that trapped heat with remarkable efficiency. The woman hums again, rocking the bundle gently. The tune has no clear melody, only rhythm, a pulse that matches her breathing. You can almost feel the sound against your skin. It's the same cadence as the sea against the shore, the same rhythm as the wind against the turf walls. The song belongs to the land as much as to her. Curiously, some of these lullabies survived through oral tradition, passed quietly down generations. Modern Icelandic folk songs still echo fragments of ancient verses that promised warmth and light through the dark. They speak of firebirds guarding the hearth, of mother's breath forming invisible shields against frost spirits. You can hear that echo now, in her voice, soft, cyclical, older than language. A debated topic among historians is whether Viking families kept separate sleeping areas for infants. Some argue for small side cradles, others for shared sleeping under the same furs. The most likely truth lies in between. Babies slept near their mothers' chests during the coldest months, where they could share body heat and steady breath. You can see that logic in motion as the woman draws the bundle closer, skin to skin beneath her cloak. The baby's cries fade almost instantly. Warmth, once again, is victory. You notice how she adjusts her position, keeping the baby's face uncovered, while tucking his body tightly. Every movement is practiced, instinctive. She doesn't need light. Her hands remember. She rocks in silence now, her back against the wooden wall, eyes half closed. The fire paints her in bronze. A curious archaeological find from Denmark revealed small, round stones in what appeared to be a cradle. Initially dismissed as toys, further analysis showed they had been heated in the hearth and wrapped in linen primitive hot stones to warm the bedding before placing the infant down. Ingenious, tender, and efficient. The same principle soldiers used centuries later with canteens of hot water was born here, in the hands of mothers who refused to let the cold claim their children. The longhouse seems to cradle them in return. The wooden beams creak softly, the turf roof settling as snow thickens overhead. The sound is low, soothing. You realize the architecture itself must have been a kind of lullaby, a shelter that breathed in rhythm with its people. Every sigh of the roof, every pop of the hearth, a familiar note in the symphony of survival. The mother hums a final verse, something about spring's return and the sun's golden hair. The melody fades, replaced by the soft hush of contentment. The baby stirs once, sighs, and sinks into sleep. She stays awake a little longer, watching the fire with heavy eyes. You can almost feel her thoughts, the relief of another night endured, the quiet prayer that tomorrow's dawn will come sooner than yesterday's. According to some ethnographic parallels drawn from later Scandinavian traditions, mothers sometimes left small offerings for the husvatir, the house spirits, when their children survived a harsh winter. A few crumbs of bread, a drop of milk, or even a whisper of thanks left near the hearth. Whether superstition or gratitude, it speaks to a truth that transcends time. When warmth holds, life feels sacred. You take in the scene, the mother asleep now, child secure against her chest, the faint glow of coals painting both in the softest orange light. Around them, others sleep, cocooned in shared air. The air smells of ash, milk, and quiet triumph. It's strange, you think, how something so fragile, one fire, one body's heat, can stand between existence and oblivion. Yet here it is, stubborn and real, alive in every breath. Somewhere near the doorway, a gust of wind seeps through the cracks, cool and clean. The baby shifts slightly, and the mother instinctively pulls him closer, never waking. The motion is fluid, ancient. You can almost see it repeated across centuries, thousands of mothers, thousands of winters, the same gesture preserving the same fragile spark. You lie back down, pulling your own cloak tight. The faint hum of shared breath fills the hall again. The child sighs once more, a small puff of life in the smoky dark, and you feel something deep inside your chest ease. The Vikings understood this simple, ageless truth. Warmth is not fire alone, it's the body, the breath, the lullaby. And when a mother hums through the storm, she keeps not just her child alive, but the memory of spring itself. Morning arrives with a pale, uncertain light. The storm has calmed, leaving behind a silence so deep it feels fragile. You sit up, rubbing sleep from your eyes, and the smell of something rich and savory drifts from the hearth stew, thick and slow-cooked, its scent cutting through the smoke like a promise. Someone must have risen before dawn to tend the fire and start the meal. According to residue analysis from Viking cooking pots unearthed in Denmark and Iceland, the winter diet was heavy, dense, and built for endurance. Fat, not sweetness, was their warmth. The stew bubbling now mirrors those findings: chunks of dried fish softened in broth, slabs of pork, a handful of barley, and maybe a sprig of dill if someone remembered to dry it last autumn. You can almost taste the salt in the air. The woman from the night before stirs the pot with a wooden spoon, the motion steady and hypnotic. She adds something from a clay jar rendered animal fat, most likely. It hits the hot broth and melts instantly, spreading a sheen of oil across the surface. You realize that every spoonful of this stew is another layer of insulation from the inside out. Few people today understand how carefully the Vikings calibrated their diet to survive the dark months. High in fat, low in waste, designed to keep metabolism burning steadily even when movement was minimal. Dried meats, fermented fish, butter, lard, and mead were not indulgences, they were fire in edible form. A curious fact uncovered in the Greenland settlements: some families mixed dried berries into animal fat and rolled it into small balls, a kind of energy ration for long winter nights. The sweetness of berries, the strength of fat tiny suns stored in the palm of a hand. You imagine them passed around by lamplight, each bite a silent reminder that warmth begins with nourishment. The stew bubbles thicker now, filling the hall with a haze of scent, earthy, comforting, primal. The others begin to stir, drawn awake by hunger. Someone laughs softly, a rasping sound that cracks the quiet. A man throws a few more peat blocks into the fire, and the flames flare up, painting the walls in fresh gold. You take a bowl when it's offered. The wood feels warm in your hands. the surface slick from years of use. Steam curls upward, carrying the scent of meat and smoke. You blow gently and sip. The flavor is intense, salt, fat, and faint sweetness from barley. It spreads through you like slow fire, reaching fingers and toes, easing stiffness. Some historians believe that diet alone played a crucial role in Viking survival, what they call metabolic insulation. Fat stores acted as a natural heater, fueling the body's ability to generate warmth even during sleep. It's a simple equation. Eat enough, and you can face the storm. Eat poorly, and the frost wins. You can feel that truth in every swallow. You glance around at the others as they eat. No one speaks much. Eating is a silent, shared ritual, almost meditative. The sound of spoons against bowls blends with the crackle of the hearth. There's no hurry. They eat as though each bite carries a kind of reverence. And maybe it does. Curiously enough, ancient Norse texts describe meals not as moments of luxury, but as moments of balance. Food was heat, mead was light, and fire was time itself measured, not by the sun, but by the boiling of the pot. One saga describes a family enduring a 30-day snowstorm, keeping sanity by reciting stories between bites, letting food mark the rhythm of day and night. You swallow another mouthful, feeling your stomach bloom with warmth. It's not just comfort, it's fuel. The cold, you realize, is relentless in how it drains life from the body, minute by minute. Food is how you buy those minutes back. A debated question among nutritional anthropologists concerns whether the Vikings understood this balance scientifically or instinctively. Did they consciously choose high-fat diets for warmth, or was it simply what the land offered? The answer hardly matters now. What matters is that it worked. The evidence lies here, in the way your body responds, waking fully as the meal sinks in. One of the older men wipes his mouth with the back of his hand and chuckles. "Good fat keeps bad gods away," he says, and the others laugh softly. There's wisdom in the jest. Warmth, faith, and fullness were intertwined. An empty belly made a man vulnerable not just to hunger, but to doubt. A seldom told detail from sagas and folklore suggests that after meals, Vikings often left scraps of food near the hearth as offerings to unseen guardians. It wasn't wastefulness, it was gratitude. The logic was simple: share your warmth, and warmth returns. The remnants of the meal would sizzle in the embers, smoke curling upward like a quiet prayer. You see that custom repeated now. A woman scoops a spoonful of stew and drops it into the fire. The fat flares, and the scent intensifies. For a moment, the hall seems to glow brighter, the people around you caught between flickering light and steam. It's easy to imagine how such rituals became habit. Food was more than sustenance, it was rhythm, ceremony, defiance. To eat well in winter was to declare victory, if only for another day. When the bowls are empty, the silence lingers. You lean back against the wall, the heat from the meal still blooming through you. Outside, the wind sighs again, but its voice sounds softer now, less like a threat and more like a distant memory. You realize that the Vikings didn't just endure the cold, they partnered with it, building layers of warmth not only around their bodies but within them. Fire, breath, and food, three kinds of flame, each feeding the others. You set your empty bowl aside and close your eyes for a moment. The heat in your chest feels steady, almost eternal. It's the same heat that carried these people through blizzards and darkness, through months when the sun itself seemed to disappear. They didn't need sunlight. They carried their own. The last traces of stew vanish from the bowls, and soon the sounds of the longhouse return to their gentle rhythm, low conversation, the faint creak of beams, the distant hum of wind against the roof. Someone near the fire shakes out a fur blanket, sending a puff of ash and warmth into the air. The embers brighten slightly, glowing like a nest of tiny suns. As the day drifts toward evening again, people begin their quiet rituals of preparation. You watch as a man broad-shouldered, his beard streaked with frost, carefully lays out hides near the hearth. Each motion is deliberate, practiced through countless winters. He isn't building a bed so much as composing one, layering warmth in a pattern that has worked for generations. Excavations in Norway and the Orkney Islands reveal that Viking bedding wasn't random heaps of pelts. It was engineered with care. The bottom layer was coarse sheepskin or reindeer hide, with the fur facing down, creating insulation against the cold wood or earth. Above that came softer hides, then woven wool, then finally smaller furs tucked into corners where drafts might sneak in. A hand-built cocoon, perfected by instinct. You kneel beside him, watching. He presses each layer flat, smoothing wrinkles, muttering quietly to himself. Maybe he's counting, maybe praying. The movements have a rhythm, and even the sound, the hiss of fur against fur, feels like a kind of music. A seldom discussed discovery from an Icelandic farmstead showed that the furs closest to the hearth often carried faint traces of pine resin and fish oil. Those sticky substances weren't accidents. They were primitive waterproofing. In the dampness of long winters, every layer had to resist more than cold. It had to defy moisture, smoke, and time. When he finishes, the bed gleams faintly in the dim light, a mosaic of hides and wool. He sits back and exhales, satisfied. The air smells faintly of animal musk and salt. To you, it's not unpleasant, it's the smell of endurance, of the wilderness tamed just enough to share its strength. Across the room, a woman prepares another sleeping platform. Her approach is different, more methodical. She shakes crushed herbs over the hides, their scent rising sharp and green. Juniper, perhaps, or sweet gale. According to botanical residue found in Viking bedding, such plants were commonly used not just for fragrance, but to repel insects and purify the air. The longhouse was a world without soap, yet somehow it stayed clean enough to cradle generations. She lifts a corner of a pelt and shows the child beside her how to tuck moss underneath it. "Warm feet, warm dreams," she whispers. The boy nods solemnly, as though she's passing down a secret. In truth, she is. Researchers have long debated how often Viking families replaced or aired out their bedding. Some believe they took it outside during the brief winter thaws to freeze dry in sunlight. Others argue that smoke and herbs did most of the work. Whatever the method, the result was the same. Homes that smelled not of decay but of earth and comfort. You watch as the woman folds a final fur, a thick reindeer pelt, glossy and silver at the tips, and lays it carefully over the pile. Then, with the tip of a stick, she draws a quick rune on the wood beside the bed. It's Fehu, the symbol for prosperity, shaped like a little branching F. Not just wealth in gold, but wealth in warmth. In the Norse world, a bed that stayed warm through the night was worth more than treasure. A curious piece of folklore from Iceland tells of families who named their bedding, especially the oldest or best-made layers. Old Grey, Snow, Killer, Dreamhide, names that blurred the line between object and companion. You can almost hear the affection in those words, born from gratitude. When the world froze, the hides beneath you were not just possessions, they were partners. The man who laid the first bed now sits, testing it. He grins when it creaks just right. "Good as Freya's beard," he says, a compliment, apparently, judging by the laughter it draws. Someone tosses him a small flask, and he takes a slow sip before lying back. The furs swallow him whole. The smell of smoke deepens as more people begin arranging their sleeping places. The hearth becomes a center of movement, logs adjusted, hides shaken, children gathered and wrapped. The process has the slow grace of a well-rehearsed dance. Each gesture matters, each fold of fur placed with the care of a craftsman. Archaeologists studying soot layers in Viking ruins note something surprising. Beneath each layer of ash, there are thin traces of animal hair and fibers. It means that bedding was sometimes burned at the end of winter, offered to the fire before new hides replaced it, maybe to drive away illness, maybe to honor the passing season. The fire consumed the old warmth, then birthed the new. You stretch your legs toward the fire, feeling its warmth lick the soles of your boots. The light flickers over the hides, turning them into a landscape of soft hills and valleys. The people here aren't just preparing to sleep, they're preparing to surrender safely to the night. A faint wind slips through a crack in the door, and one of the dogs growls softly. Instantly, someone leans over, pats its head, and pulls an extra fur across the threshold. The act is automatic, unspoken. Warmth, like safety, is everyone's duty. The room dims further. The last hide is laid down, the final log turned to catch the flame. The air grows heavier, richer. The scent of herbs and musk blends with the faint tang of soot until you can't tell one from the other. It's not just heat filling the room now, it's texture, weight, history. You lie down, sinking into your own pile of hides. They shift under you like water, then settle into a perfect cradle. The softness is deceptive. Beneath it lies discipline, knowledge built over centuries of trial and endurance. Every layer tells a story. This hide from a hunt in autumn, that pelt a gift from kin, another traded for grain across the sea. As your eyes close, you hear someone whisper softly to no one in particular, "The hides remember." It's not superstition, not exactly, it's gratitude, spoken aloud. The hides remember the animal's warmth. The fire remembers the tree's breath. The house, in its quiet way, remembers everyone who ever trusted it to outlast the cold. The crackle of the hearth fades into steady breathing once more. The hides hold your weight like old friends, wrapping you in centuries of knowledge and care. And for a moment, you understand what the Vikings understood, that warmth isn't won in a single night. It's layered, earned, and tended like the fire itself. The fire has burned down to a quiet glow, and the longhouse is a nest of sleeping shapes beneath furs and wool. Yet sleep here isn't absence, it's a different kind of life. You lie on your side, eyes open just enough to watch the shadows play across the beams, the smoke twisting lazily like a spirit in no hurry to leave. The air is thick, heavy with breath and dream. According to early Norse writings and folklore, sleep in winter carried a peculiar weight in the Viking world. It wasn't just rest, it was a voyage. The word draumar, dreams, shared roots with words for vision and travel. To close your eyes was to drift somewhere beyond the snow, where the gods, ancestors, and omens waited. You can feel that truth in the air now, the way it hums faintly, as though thought and dream mingle with the smoke. Somewhere near the hearth, an old man mutters in his sleep, his voice low and rhythmic. A child stirs, then sighs softly. Each breath seems to carry fragments of invisible worlds. Curiously enough, many Viking burials include small amulets carved from bone or amber tokens meant to guide the sleeper safely through both dreams and death. The boundary between the two was thin here, perhaps thinner than anywhere else on Earth. When you live this close to nature's silence, it's easy to believe that dreams might listen back. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sounds fade. Beneath your lids, the red afterglow of the fire dances like distant lightning. It flickers behind the darkness, and slowly, images begin to form. You imagine how it must have felt for these people to dream through the long winter, endless nights stretching without sunrise, when time itself seemed to slow and twist. Some scholars remain divided on whether seasonal darkness affected the Vikings' sense of time and consciousness. Did months of dim light blur the line between waking and sleeping? Or did they embrace that fluid state, letting dreams become their compass through the cold? Whatever the truth, you sense that sleep here was more than escape. It was conversation. You breathe in the scent of furs, smoke, and faint herbs still clinging to the air. The warmth wraps around you, the steady hum of breath rising and falling nearby. You drift into half-sleep yourself, carried by the rhythm of the house. The dream comes quickly, seamless as breath. You're walking through a snowfield, the horizon flat and shining. The wind doesn't bite, it sings, weaving low notes that vibrate through your bones. Ahead stands a figure cloaked in white, their face hidden. You know somehow that they're not a stranger. They've walked these dreams before, thousands of times. They raise a hand, and from their palm drifts a small spark, red, gold, and pulsing like a heartbeat. It floats toward you, warm even from a distance. You reach out to touch it, and as you do, the sound of the wind fades, replaced by the soft crackle of the hearth. The spark lands in your hand, weightless yet alive, and for a moment you feel every breath in the longhouse moving as one. Then the sound of laughter breaks the vision, a child's giggle, bright and fleeting. You open your eyes. The room is the same as before, yet different. The dream lingers like a mist, half memory, half warmth. An intriguing detail from Icelandic literature notes that some Vikings believed dreams travelled through smoke. The curling trails from the hearth acted as bridges for spirits and thoughts. It's a poetic image, the invisible rising through the visible, vanishing into the night sky. You watch the smoke now, wondering what unseen dreams it carries. The old man near the hearth stirs again, murmuring a word that sounds like Sol. The Sunday, maybe he's dreaming of spring. It makes sense. When months pass without daylight, the sun becomes more than a celestial body, it's an idea, a promise, a warmth so precious it burns, even in absence. Few people realize that the Vikings marked time not just by daylight, but by brightness. Their calendars measured the world through the play of light and dark. In this season, the long sleep wasn't laziness, it was rhythm. Animals hibernated, the earth rested, and humans followed suit, conserving energy for the sun's eventual return. A rare passage in the saga of Eyrbyggja mentions how families would sleep longer during the darkest months, waking only to tend fires, eat, and tell stories. The sagas call it the quiet season, when even the gods seem to slumber. That rhythm of rest wasn't weakness, it was adaptation. The Vikings understood that the body, like the land, needed stillness to survive. You stretch beneath the firs, listening to the steady pulse of air and silence. The fire crackles softly, each spark like the echo of a heartbeat. You think of how dreams must have served as both compass and comfort, guiding people through months without sun, keeping hope alive when memory of warmth grew faint. A curious fringe belief, recorded by later Norse chroniclers, claims that the dead could visit the living through dreams on the longest nights. Ancestors would sit quietly beside the fire in visions, offering advice or simply presence. Whether it was imagination or something deeper, the effect was the same. Sleep turned into communion, warmth stretching even across death. You glance toward the hearth and catch a strange shimmer in the corner of your eye. Just the light, perhaps, playing tricks through the smoke. But you can't help feeling watched, not by menace, but by something older, patient, protective. You close your eyes again. Behind your lids, the glow of the fire becomes the glow of that spark from the dream. You imagine it drifting through the smoky air, touching each sleeper, leaving warmth behind like breath upon glass. The Vikings, you realize, didn't simply survive their winters, they dreamed through them, weaving the dark into meaning. Their bodies rested, but their minds wandered through landscapes of gods and light, reminding them that every long night, no matter how endless, eventually yields to dawn. You shift beneath the firs, pulling them closer. The hall breathes around you, fire, smoke, air, dream, all moving together in one endless rhythm. You exhale, slow and easy, and whisper to no one in particular, "Let the light return." The words vanish into the smoke, but the warmth remains. You wake before dawn, though dawn here is little more than a grey thickening of the air. The hearth glows softly, no flame, only coals, but it's enough to paint the room in shades of ember and ash. You sit up, your breath curling white in front of you, and realize how strange it is to feel both cold and safe at once. Someone moves quietly by the fire. It's the eldest man of the household, his beard silvered with frost, his movements slow but sure. He kneels beside the hearth and begins his work, the same ritual performed every morning of every winter since memory began. He stirs the ashes, finds the living spark hidden deep beneath the grey, and breathes. You watch the ember brighten, spreading its glow through the dust. He adds a curl of dry bark, then a splinter of wood, coaxing flame like one might wake a sleeping animal. Within moments, the fire rekindles, licking upward with a faint crackle. Archaeological studies of Viking hearths show this daily ritual wasn't merely practical, it was symbolic. Families rarely let the hearth die completely. Even when everyone slept, a small ember was kept alive beneath ash. The first task at morning's light was to rebirth it, a domestic echo of creation itself. The hearth was the heart of the home, and the fire, its pulse. Few modern people realize how much knowledge went into maintaining such a fire. The ash acted as insulation, keeping the coals alive for up to 12 hours without flame. Too much ash, and it smothered. Too little, and it froze. The Vikings found balance through intuition, listening, watching, breathing in rhythm with the fire. The man leans closer now, his face bathed in soft light. He whispers something under his breath, a few words. Maybe a prayer, maybe a reminder. You can't quite hear them, but the tone is reverent. To him, this act isn't just routine, it's resurrection. Curiously, in several sagas, the goddess Frigg, protector of hearth and home, is described as the keeper of hidden fire. Some scholars suggest that phrase was inspired by this morning ritual, the quiet art of coaxing life from grey. Every Viking home, then, was a temple in miniature, every dawn a ceremony. You reach forward to warm your hands, and the new flame greets you. Its heat feels alive, different from the steady coals of night. It has a pulse again, a voice. The man nods approvingly and feeds it more wood. Around you, sleepers begin to stir. The house exhales. The dogs rise first, stretching, their fur steaming faintly in the sudden light. A woman rubs her eyes and begins to feed the animals, scattering handfuls of grain into troughs by the partition. Children murmur sleepily, half buried under furs. The longhouse, so still moments ago, fills with the soft chaos of morning life. According to records from later Norse settlements, mornings in winter were slow, almost ritualized. There was no rush. The day outside was too short, the dark too long. Instead of dawn marking beginnings, it marked continuity, the return of warmth, of rhythm, of light to the center of the house. The man tending the fire now uses a long iron hook to lift the kettle into place. You hear the satisfying clang of metal against metal, the hiss as frost melts from the handle. The scent of boiling water begins to rise, sharp and clean. Someone pours grain into a wooden bowl and stirs. Another grinds dried herbs with a stone pestle, their scent brightening the smoky air, juniper perhaps or angelica, both believed to guard against illness. A curious observation from environmental archaeology shows traces of these very herbs embedded in soot samples. Their oils, carried upward by smoke, coated the beams, forming an invisible medicine. The Vikings didn't have disinfectant, but their fires purified the air in their own quiet way. You sip the thin broth handed to you, a morning drink made from barley water, flavored faintly with honey. It's not rich, but it's warm, and that's enough. Around you, people speak in low tones, voices rasped by sleep but steady. There's no rush to venture outside yet. The light beyond the doorway remains dim, the world still steeped in blue. Some historians debate how much of Viking life took place indoors during these long winters. Were they idle or busy? Evidence suggests the latter. The longhouse was not a prison, it was a workshop. As the day lengthens slightly, people begin their chores, mending ropes, shaping tools, weaving wool. Every motion seems designed to make warmth, not just a feeling, but an action. You notice a woman pulling flax fibers through a wooden comb, the strands catching faint firelight. Her hands move quickly, producing thread finer than you'd expect in such rough surroundings. The whir of a spindle joins the rhythm of the crackling hearth. Wool, fire, patience all binding together in one continuous song. An odd, delightful fact from medieval sources tells that Norse women often measured time by how many spindles they filled between meals. When the sun barely rose, Spinning became the heartbeat of the house, the act that kept hands moving, minds steady, and conversation alive. A child asks when spring will come. The woman smiles and replies, "When the wool is gone." You can't tell if it's a joke or wisdom disguised as one. Either way, it carries truth. Work was time itself here, measured not by clocks, but by survival. The man who revived the fire now sits beside it, his task complete. He holds his hands out toward the flame and sighs. There's peace in his face, the calm satisfaction of one who has preserved life for another day. You realize that in this world, every small act, breathing, stirring, feeding, mending, is a declaration of endurance. Curiously enough, one Norse poem compares the home fire to a guardian spirit sleeping inside the wood. "Strike the log, wake the soul," it says. You think of that now as you watch the flame climb higher, licking at the fresh timber like a living tongue. Perhaps warmth was never merely physical. It was consciousness, the will of the living refusing to be still. The fire grows stronger. The smoke thickens, glowing amber in the half-light. Someone hums quietly, maybe the same lullaby you heard the night before. Outside, the storm begins to ease at last. You can hear the faint dripping of thaw from the roof, the slow promise of change. The longhouse breathes again, alive, awake and defiant. You hold your hands toward the flame and smile. In the Viking world, every dawn was a small victory. The embers never died, and neither did they. By midday, the longhouse hums with steady work. The air feels alive again, full of motion and rhythm, the kind of quiet industry that defines survival. Smoke curls upward in slow spirals, and the light filtering through the smoke hole paints everything in hues of gold and grey. You sit near the doorway, where the cold air seeps in faintly, and watch the daily miracle unfold, warmth being made, shaped, and maintained by human hands. A man crouches near the outer wall, pressing fresh turf into a crack where the frost has bitten through. His hands are bare, fingers red and raw, but his movements are sure, even gentle. Each slab of mossy earth fits perfectly, sealing the house like a patchwork of green and brown. According to architectural studies of Viking homes, such maintenance wasn't occasional, it was daily. The house was a living thing, and its skin required tending like flesh. You can smell the damp turf as he presses it into place, the scent of soil, faintly sweet, mingling with the smoke. The wall sighs softly under his touch. It's strange, but you almost feel that the structure knows what he's doing. Few modern people realize that Viking longhouses were designed to move. The timbers flexed in wind, the turf settled and shifted with temperature. What looks like crude construction was actually elastic engineering. In blizzards, rigidity breaks, but a house that breathes can outlast storms. Inside, another rhythm joins the scene. A woman beating wool with wooden paddles to soften it before spinning. Thud, thud, thud. The sound fills the hall, steady as a drum. Around her, children sit threading beads onto leather cords, their small fingers deft and focused. Work here is not punishment, it's life distilled into motion. Archaeologists have found traces of pigment and glass near hearth sites, evidence that even in the dead of winter, crafts continued. The Vikings didn't wait for summer to make beauty, they made it in the dark. Glass beads, bone combs, bronze brooches, small acts of creation against the cold silence. You run your fingers along a half-finished comb lying nearby. The bone is smooth, the edges finely carved. Someone has etched tiny patterns along the spine spirals, waves, something like leaves. You imagine the maker whittling it by firelight, each stroke steady despite frozen fingers. Curiously enough, one find from the trading town of Birka revealed a comb inscribed with runes that read, "I comb my courage." Scholars still argue whether it was a joke, a charm, or something deeper. Maybe, you think, it was all three. In winter, courage needed constant grooming. You glance toward the door again, where the man repairing the wall pauses to stretch his back. His breath steams faintly in the dim light. The cold slips through for a moment, touching your face like a warning. He notices too, and quickly stuffs more moss into the seam, then pats it flat. There, he mutters. The wind forgets us again. A debated theory among historians holds that Viking builders intentionally allowed slight air leaks in their walls. The purpose wasn't poor construction, it was ventilation. Too tight, and smoke would choke the house. Too loose, and warmth would flee. The line between life and death was measured in inches of gap and handfuls of moss. The woman at the loom shifts position. The clack of her shuttle blends with the sound of the fire. The wool threads shimmer faintly, catching what little daylight filters through the smoke hole. She hums as she works, her voice rising and falling in time with her weaving. Each song, each thread, another small defiance of the cold. You ask softly what she's making. She smiles without pausing. A new cloak, she says. The last one grew tired. You nod, understanding that here, even garments live and die like people. A curious tidbit recorded in medieval accounts describes how Vikings believed clothing absorbed not just warmth but spirit. An old cloak, worn through many winters, was said to carry the memories of its wearer. When it was burned or buried, people whispered farewell as though to an old friend. The woman pauses to adjust her thread. A cloak must remember you, she adds, half to herself, or it won't keep you warm. You can't tell if she's joking or serious, but the line feels true. Warmth, after all, is more than temperature, it's memory held close. The children nearby laugh as they finish their beaded cords. One ties his around the neck of a small wooden figure, perhaps Thor, perhaps just a toy. The beads clink softly against the wood. You catch the faint shimmer of blue glass, impossibly bright against the dim hall. Even here, in a world of frost and ash, colour blooms. An unexpected discovery from Norse trade routes explains how far those blues travelled cobalt glass beads from the east, traded across continents. To think, in a room buried under snow, someone wears a piece of sky brought from half a world away. Warmth, it seems, is not only made, it's imported, cherished, remembered. The man at the wall finishes his work and joins the others by the hearth. His hands are raw, his nails black with soil, but his eyes gleam. He holds them out to the fire and sighs. The house breathes better now, he says. So do we. A hush settles for a moment, the kind born of shared satisfaction. Then someone begins to speak a short tale, maybe a joke, and laughter ripples softly through the room. The sound fills the longhouse like sunlight might, if it dared return. You sit back, feeling the layered warmth all around. In the fire, in the moss-packed walls, in the hum of work and speech. Every detail here, every thread, bead and handful of earth is part of a single design, to make life possible in a place where everything else sleeps or dies. The Vikings didn't conquer their winters through strength alone. They negotiated with it one seam, one song, one heartbeat at a time. You glance toward the smoke hole, where a pale shaft of light catches in the drifting ash. Dust motes shimmer like snowflakes, suspended in golden haze. The storm outside might rage again tomorrow, but tonight, this world holds. And that, you think, is the truest kind of warmth crafted, not given. The light outside fades again, slipping back into the long blue twilight that defines the northern winter. Inside the longhouse, the fire has been built higher, fed by careful hands. It's not a roaring blaze, never wasteful, but a controlled, deliberate warmth that breathes in rhythm with the people it protects. You can hear the fire more than see it, the sigh of air through damp wood, the occasional hiss as sap boils and bursts, the slow collapse of a burning log into coals. The glow spills across the floor, flickering along the rough grain of the planks, and you realize that every evening must have looked just like this for centuries. The same colors, the same sounds, the same battle between flame and dark. According to carbonized remnants studied in Scandinavian archaeological sites, Viking hearths burned a mix of peat, birch, and driftwood. Each fuel had its own role. peat for endurance, birch for brightness, driftwood for fragrance. Together, they produced a heat that lasted through the longest nights. You can smell it now, the sweetness of birch, the earthy musk of peat, the faint tang of salt from the sea wood. Few people realize how sensory a Viking night truly was. In the absence of sight, the world became a symphony of touch, sound, and scent. The crackle of fire replaced the ticking of clocks. The gentle sting of smoke was a familiar comfort. Even the way heat gathered around your legs and faded at your shoulders taught you where you were in space, inside safety, within the circle of light. You stretch your hands toward the fire, palms out. The warmth prickles across your skin, making your fingers ache pleasantly. Someone adds another log, and for a moment, sparks leap upward, tiny gold flecks that rise, dance, and vanish into the smoke hole above. It's easy to see why the Vikings believed in spirits of the flame. Some sagas describe them as elder andar, fire-breathing souls, guardians of the hearth. To let the fire die was to lose more than heat. It was to offend a living force. That belief makes sense here. Watching the flame now, you can almost feel it watching back. A patient ally that asks only respect in return. A curious, seldom discussed practice among Norse farmers involved singing to the fire when adding fuel. Not in words, but in hums, low, steady tones, meant to soothe the spirit of flame. The logic was simple. Calm fire, calm night. You hear it now, faintly a woman's quiet hum as she stirs the embers. The pitch vibrates softly through the floor, through the wood, through you. It's hypnotic. You feel yourself slowing, thoughts untangling, heartbeat matching the rhythm. The sound doesn't fight the storm outside. It outlasts it. The hall smells heavier now, dense with warmth. Wool, ash, peat, and people. The air moves like water, thick, slow, full of life. The walls gleam slightly where heat has kissed the wood smooth. Each plank has darkened from years of firelight until the whole interior glows with a permanent dusk. Some researchers studying surviving turf houses in Iceland have noted that their interiors seem to store warmth in the very structure. The dense, smoke-polished beams radiate heat long after the fire wanes, like the inside of an oven after bread has been baked. You can feel that here the faint warmth emanating even from the walls. It's as though the house itself participates in the act of keeping you alive. A debated question among historians is how the Vikings managed smoke control without modern chimneys. The answer lies above you. The roof vent, small and deliberate, draws the air upward, but not too quickly. The smoke rises in slow ribbons, forming a layer near the ceiling, a smoke blanket that insulates the air below. It's dangerous if ignored, miraculous if managed. In the still light, it looks like a ghostly sea, its waves tinted gold by the fire. You breathe deeply. The scent is sharp and real, grounding. It clings to skin, hair, fabric. By spring, every thread in this hall will smell like smoke. Yet there's no disgust in that. To the Vikings, it was identity, a perfume of survival. An odd, charming detail from medieval travelers' accounts mentions that Norse merchants abroad were instantly recognizable by scent alone. They carried their fires with them, one monk wrote, half in awe. You smile at that thought, warmth, turned into signature, into memory. A woman nearby begins to plait her daughter's hair. The child sits cross-legged, silent except for the faint crackle of the fire. The mother's hands move steadily, pulling strands with gentle precision. The girl's hair gleams like amber in the firelight. Braids hold heat, the woman murmurs, perhaps half joking. But there's truth in it. Neatness preserves warmth. Tangled things waste it. You notice how everyone in the hall has found their own rhythm. The man carving a spoon beside the door, the woman mending a wool cap, the quiet voices sharing small talk. The storm outside has become irrelevant. Warmth, you realize, is no longer something they chase, it's something they maintain, an ongoing dialogue between body, home, and flame. A peculiar observation from ethnographers studying later Scandinavian homes notes that families often measured emotional harmony by the state of their fire. If the hearth burned evenly, all was well. If it sputtered or smoked, people said, the house is restless. Perhaps it's superstition, or perhaps living so close to flame teaches you to read it as you would another person's mood. The woman plaiting her daughter's hair finishes her task and ties the end with a strip of leather. She kisses the girl's head, then leans back, sighing contentedly. The fire reflects in her eyes, and for a moment she looks both exhausted and radiant. Around her, the orange glow paints everyone in soft gold, erasing lines of age and hardship. In this light, warmth itself feels like forgiveness. You stretch again, feeling the stiffness leave your limbs. The floor beneath you radiates faint heat from the stone foundation. The air moves gently against your face, and your eyelids grow heavy. The hum near the fire continues, low and endless, until even the crackle of flame seems to match its pitch. In the heart of the blizzard, this is what endurance sounds like, not defiance, but harmony. The Vikings didn't conquer the cold by roaring at it. They listened, adjusted, and found warmth in the quiet balance between stillness and fire. You close your eyes briefly and feel that same balance settle in your chest. Outside, the world is ice and wind. Inside, there is breath and hum and ember. The line between the two feels impossibly thin, yet the house holds it steady, like cupped hands around a candle. And you understand, finally, that the true genius of this people wasn't in their weapons or ships, it was here, in the simple, perfect art of keeping a single flame alive against the vast, frozen dark. The wind rises again that night, prowling outside the longhouse like a restless ghost. Snow skitters against the walls with soft, hissing sounds, and every so often, a deeper gust makes the turf roof moan. Yet inside, no one startles. The people here know that sound the voice of the storm when it's merely testing the boundaries. You're lying awake, eyes open to the dim firelight. The smoke above you drifts like slow water, thick and steady. The house creaks faintly, adjusting under the weight of new snow. It's as though the building itself breathes in time with the wind. According to measurements from excavated Viking foundations, their roofs were astonishingly heavy, sometimes weighing over 20 tons once laden with turf and snow. That mass was deliberate. It grounded the structure, allowing it to withstand the blizzards that would flatten lighter homes. In winter, a Viking roof was both burden and blessing. It held death at bay by bearing its weight. You can hear it now, the snow settling with slow, muffled thuds. Each one feels like an exhale. You imagine the cold outside, the endless drifts, the way the wind must howl across the open fjords. Yet here, inside, there's only warmth and breath. A curious note from Icelandic sagas mentions that people sometimes spoke to their roofs during storms. "Hold fast, old friend," they would murmur. Or, "Sleep, roof, and let us sleep." It sounds poetic until you realize how literal it was. The roof wasn't separate from them, it was them, part of the family's living circle of survival. You glance upward now, at the dark beams arched overhead like ribs. The roof doesn't feel like protection, it feels like belonging. A woman by the fire turns in her sleep, mumbling something. Her husband stirs beside her, lifts his head, then settles again. The child between them doesn't move. The dogs along the wall twitch and sigh. In the flickering firelight, you see the quiet choreography of endurance. Every living thing has learned the rhythm of the storm. Few people today appreciate how much patience such survival required. In the modern world, storms are inconveniences. Here, they are seasons. Whole months might pass with no break in the snow, no clear sky, no sign of spring. The Vikings learned not to fight time during these stretches, they folded into it. An intriguing observation from environmental historians suggests that Viking calendars weren't linear like ours. Time wasn't measured as progress. It was rhythm, a circle of light and dark. Winter wasn't an interruption, it was the deep breath between labors. the slow heartbeat before renewal. You feel that truth now, lying still, letting the quiet press against you like water against stone. You roll onto your side and listen to the wind's voice change. There's a strange pattern to it, almost melodic. Longhouse dwellers must have heard it like music, a constant backdrop that shaped their moods and their myths alike. The sagas are full of wind talking, warning, laughing, mourning. Perhaps, in nights like this, the wind felt like another storyteller. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining the storm as a companion rather than an enemy. Outside, the snow piles high against the walls, insulating them further. The cold works with the warmth now, not against it. Each flake adds weight that seals the cracks tighter, wrapping the house in its own frozen cocoon. Archaeologists studying turf homes found that interior temperatures often rose during blizzards. The very storms that threatened life also preserved it. It's a paradox that feels perfectly northern. Danger transformed into safety through patience. You open your eyes again and see that someone's awake across the room, the elder from before, the one who tends the fire each morning. He's sitting upright now, staring into the embers. His face is unreadable, carved with both fatigue and calm. The orange light pools in his eyes, as though he's looking into another world entirely. After a moment, he speaks not to you, not to anyone, but to the fire itself. "It's only the wind remembering us," he says softly. "Let it pass." It's a simple sentence, but it settles deep. You realize that these people lived with memory as much as with weather. Every winter echoed all those before it. Grandfathers patching the same walls, mothers singing the same songs, children learning the same way to fear and love the snow. Memory, too, was insulation. A curious, nearly forgotten detail from early Norse poetry calls memory minni, a word also used for mind and remembrance in drink. Mead toasts were made for minni, in honor of those who came before. Perhaps every act of survival here, every fire tended, every fur tucked was also a toast to ancestry. You sit up slightly and watch as the old man adds another piece of wood to the hearth. He doesn't rush. The log hisses, smokes, then catches. The flame climbs slowly, licking through darkness. The faces around the room remain serene, bathed in its renewed light. The roof creaks again, this time lower, heavier. Snow slides off one slope with a muffled thud, sending a small shiver through the walls. No one flinches. You feel the movement beneath you too, the earth settling, the timbers flexing, everything alive but steady. You think of how many nights like this must have come and gone. Thousands, perhaps. The same dance of weight, warmth, and patience. The storm is not an event, it's a teacher. The Vikings didn't build fortresses, they built instruments that could play in harmony with the cold. Outside, the wind shifts once more, now gentler, almost curious. The snow falls quieter, more like a hush than a barrage. Inside, the fire glows stronger, its light pulsing faintly like breath. The contrast is perfect movement and stillness, fury and peace. You settle back under your furs, the weight of them pressing gently over your shoulders. The old man's words echo softly in your mind, the wind remembering us. Maybe that's all winter really is, a long remembering, of warmth, of kinship, of every ember that refused to die. You close your eyes, letting that thought carry you towards sleep. The wind hums outside, the fire answers, and the house this breathing wooden soul holds you once again. By the time the wind fades, the world outside has become an ocean of silence. You wake to a dim, pewter-colored light filtering through the cracks above the doorway. The air inside feels thick with the scent of sleep, smoke, wool, and slow breath. No one rushes to move. The storm has passed, but the world beyond the walls is still buried in white. You rise, careful not to wake the sleepers, and push the heavy door open a hand's width. Cold air spills in, sharp and clean, wrapping around your face like glass. The brightness outside is blinding. The snow stretches to the horizon, perfectly smooth, the sky a pale silver dome. For a heartbeat, it looks less like a world than a dream. According to environmental studies of early Norse settlements, such mornings after blizzards were sacred pauses. Farmers, hunters, and fishers would stay indoors for hours, letting the land settle before venturing out. The silence wasn't emptiness, it was breathing space, the earth's deep exhale after days of fury. You step outside, boots sinking into the crusted snow with a satisfying crunch. The air is so still you can hear your heartbeat. Each breath freezes as you exhale, crystals sparkling briefly before disappearing. For the first time in days, the sky feels wider than the roof above you. A few footprints mark the path toward the animal pen's ghostly impressions from the night before, half filled with fresh snow. You follow them, careful, cautious. The pens themselves are half buried, only the tops of the posts visible. A faint sound reaches your ears, a snort, a shuffle. Life still stirs beneath the drifts. Curiously, records from Norse farm excavations in Greenland show that animals often wintered in semi-underground shelters built beside the longhouse. The design trapped heat rising from the earth and shared it between beasts and people alike. Some of those pens were connected directly to the home by narrow tunnels, corridors of warmth where farmers could tend their herds without ever stepping into the open air. You imagine that tunnel now, the mix of smells, fur, hay, peat, and life, and it makes sense. In the north, survival is always about proximity. The snow crunches again, and you notice the elder from before standing at the doorway, watching you. He smiles faintly, a tired but genuine curve of the lips. "The snow has sealed the world," he says, his voice hoarse. "We rest until it decides to open again." Few modern minds can grasp the patience that sentence carries. For the Vikings, time wasn't a schedule. It was weather. When the snow closed paths, they didn't fight it, they adapted inward. The cold became an invitation to repair, to dream, to remember. You follow the elder back inside, grateful for the sudden rush of warmth that meets you. The contrast hits like a tide frost, melting instantly from your hair, your skin tingling with returning heat. The air feels dense and alive again, smoky and safe. Someone near the fire is roasting fish, small river trout, silvery and fat. The smell floods the hall, filling every shadowed corner with salt and oil. Your stomach growls before you even realize it. A curious, rarely noted fact about Viking cuisine is how central preserved fish became to their winter diet. Not just dried, but fermented or smoked, stored in wooden barrels sealed with moss and resin. The process was pungent, yes, but the result was a miracle of endurance, protein that could last months without spoiling. The Vikings didn't merely endure scarcity, they engineered abundance in slow, invisible ways. You take a piece when offered, the surface crisp, the inside tender. The flavor is strong, smoky, faintly sweet with the residue of peat smoke. It tastes like the land itself, bitter, rich, and impossibly alive. As you eat, the elder sits across from you, holding his own portion with rough, scarred fingers. "Every storm gives its gift," he says simply. "This one brought quiet." It's true. The silence outside lingers even here. Voices are low, footsteps careful. The fire burns steadily, its light spreading in calm waves across the room. For the first time in days, there's no rush to do anything. The longhouse has entered its gentlest rhythm, recovery. Archaeologists studying patterns of daily life in Viking homes note this phase of winter living as the pause. After blizzards, when fields were lost under snow and fishing impossible, people shifted inward entirely. They mended tools, shared tales, planned spring voyages. Even ambition had to sleep for a while. You look around and see it happening, quiet tasks, deliberate motions. A woman braids rope from twisted wool. A man scrapes a blade against a piece of antler, shaping it into a hook. Each small act feels meditative. The storm outside has purified the air, and with it, the mood. A fascinating fringe theory among cultural historians suggests that these enforced pauses, these long, silent recoveries nurtured the Vikings' famed resilience. The calm after storm became part of their psychology. They didn't just face chaos, they prepared to rest afterward. It was built into their worldview like a heartbeat. The elder finishes his meal and sets the bones gently into the fire. The flames hiss, flaring briefly. "Feed the ash," he says, "and it feeds you back." His words sound like proverb and physics at once. You nod, feeling their truth in your bones. You notice a small pile of melted snow dripping into a wooden bowl near the doorway. It gleams in the dim light like liquid glass. That, too, is ritual, collecting the storm's remnants for washing, for drinking, for gratitude. Nothing here is wasted. Even melted snow becomes a blessing. The child from the previous night awakens, rubbing her eyes. She yawns, stretches, then crawls toward the fire. Her mother wraps a cloak around her shoulders and kisses the top of her head. The gesture feels timeless, like something you could find in any century, any culture. For all their battles and voyages, it's these quiet moments that kept them alive. You glance upward at the smoke hole. A thin shaft of silver light has found its way through, catching in the drifting haze. Dust motes shimmer like tiny stars, suspended in amber warmth. You realize then that even in this frozen world, the sun still exists, muted, far away, but never gone. Somewhere deep in the sagas, there's a line that says, "After the snow's breath, the world begins again." You don't remember which story it's from, but you feel its meaning now. The blizzard wasn't punishment, it was reset. And these people, wrapped in smoke and patience, know exactly how to wait for beginnings. You sit closer to the fire, hands outstretched, feeling the slow pulse of its heat. The storm's memory lingers in your skin, but it's fading, replaced by something steadier. Outside, the snow lies heavy and perfect, sealing the world in silence. Inside, the longhouse hums with quiet strength, the calm heartbeat of survival continuing unbroken. You take one more breath of the smoky air and think, this is what victory sounds like. Not shouting, not triumph, just warmth that endures after the wind is gone. The days that follow drift together, unhurried and soft around the edges. You lose track of when one ends, and the next begins. Time has melted, like snow turning to mist. The longhouse becomes a world unto itself, sealed in a cocoon of warmth and breath. The storm outside has long since quieted, yet no one rushes to open the door fully. They've learned that in the north, patience is its own kind of fire. You wake to the sound of quiet work again. Someone is splitting logs with a short axe, each strike muffled by the snowdrift pressing against the outer walls. Another is scraping frost from the beams with a flat bone blade, letting the soot beneath gleam darkly. The rhythm of daily life has returned, not busy, not idle, simply steady. According to detailed studies of Viking farm settlements in Norway, winter work followed a specific pattern. Morning, maintenance. Afternoon, making. Evening, memory. The first was survival, the second creation, and the third reflection. You feel all three currents moving through the hall even now, subtle but unmistakable. You watch a woman plucking feathers from a bundle beside the fire. They drift upward like flakes of ash, catching in her hair. She hums as she works, sorting the down from the quills. Nearby, a man stretches a strip of reindeer hide over a wooden frame, scraping it clean with a flint-edged tool. Each sound, pluck, scrape, sigh, blends into the same music of endurance. Few people realize that winter was the Vikings' most creative season. Confined indoors, they turned to craft, sewing sails, carving idols, making tools and ornaments. In some excavations, archaeologists have found entire layers of debris, wood shavings, bone dust, and metal scraps trapped beneath hearth ash from the coldest months. The evidence reads like a winter diary, written not in ink, but in work. You crouch beside the man cleaning the hide. His hands move slowly, almost tenderly, as though the act itself has become sacred. He looks up once, smiling faintly. The hide remembers its warmth, he says. You just have to remind it who it was. You nod, though you don't quite know if he's joking. There's a rhythm to everything here. When the scraping pauses, the woman's humming fills the space. When her song stops, the wind outside sighs faintly. The longhouse isn't a place, it's an organism, every sound part of a larger breath. A curious fact from Icelandic literature notes that the word for home, heima, shared its root with world. To the Norse, the home was the world, the universe reduced to a manageable size. Here, surrounded by walls of earth and timber, everything they needed existed within reach. Warmth, story, labor, love. You realize, sitting here, that perhaps that's why they survived where others couldn't. They didn't live inside the world, they lived with it. The man finishes scraping and begins rubbing fat into the hide, his hands moving in small, circular motions. The smell is strong, animal, and earthy, but not unpleasant. He explains that this makes the skin supple, resistant to moisture. Even the wind can't chew through it, he says, chuckling. You picture cloaks like this one hanging near the fire, smelling of smoke and salt, built to outlast years of frost. A peculiar discovery from Viking burial mounds suggests that leather wasn't merely practical, it was symbolic. Some grave goods include small scraps of hide shaped into hearts, tucked inside pouches or sewn into clothing. The meaning remains debated. A charm for courage, perhaps, or a wish for warmth that follows into death. Whatever its purpose, the message feels simple: warmth deserves reverence. You turn to see the elder now sitting near the door, sharpening his axe on a whetstone. The rhythm is hypnotic, slow, circular, unending. Each scrape releases a faint metallic note. Sparks jump occasionally, vanishing before they touch the floor. You realize he's not hurrying to go outside. He's tending to readiness itself. When you live in a world this cold, even stillness has to be prepared for. Some scholars of Norse daily life suggest that this quiet winter productivity built the mental endurance for raiding and exploration. The patience learned by tending fires, fixing walls, and sewing sails in silence forged minds capable of surviving months at sea. The storm outside the longhouse was only rehearsal for the ones they'd meet on the open ocean. You glance toward the fire. It's smaller today, but brighter, its flames tight and steady. A child pokes at it with a stick, and the embers leap, scattering sparks. Her mother laughs softly. "Careful," she says. "That's how stars escape." The child looks up at the roof as though expecting to see constellations forming in the smoke. You follow her gaze and notice the faint shimmer of soot dancing in the rising heat. It's oddly beautiful, the ceiling alive with soft, flickering motion. Perhaps this is what the Vikings saw every night. Their own kind of stars, glowing indoors, constant even when the sky itself disappeared. A fragment from the Havamal says, "Fire is the friend of all who dwell on earth." But sitting here, you realize it's more than friendship. It's partnership. Fire demands attention, rewards respect, and punishes neglect. In that sense, it's as alive as any of the animals sleeping just beyond the partition. The woman with the feathers begins to stuff them into a linen sack, likely a pillow or sleeping mat. She presses her face into it for a moment and smiles. "The air remembers softness," she murmurs, then laughs at herself. You can't help but smile too. Here, even the smallest comfort feels profound. By late afternoon, the hall grows darker, the only light the amber pulse of the fire. The air thickens with warmth, the kind that seeps into bones rather than skin. Work slows. Someone hums again an old tune, circular and calm. The walls creak softly as if they're breathing with the song. You lean back, feeling the hides beneath you shift and settle. The air smells of oil, ash, and quiet triumph. Around you, everything has softened: the light, the sounds, even the pace of thought. The Vikings survived winter not through strength alone, but through intimacy with their homes, their craft, their fire. They didn't escape the season. They inhabited it. Every stroke of the whetstone, every handful of moss, every whispered song was a piece of warmth stitched into time. Outside, The snow gleams faintly under a distant moon. Inside, the fire hums. The house endures, alive in its rhythm of work and stillness. And you, sitting in its quiet heart, finally understand warmth isn't an element here, it's a language. One learned slowly, spoken through hands, and never forgotten. Night falls early again, as it always does in this endless season of blue and ember. You can tell the light outside has gone not because the world turns darker, it's already dark, but because the temperature changes. The cold presses closer to the walls, dense and deliberate, like an ancient creature sniffing for cracks. Inside, though, the fire holds steady, a small sun refusing to surrender. The longhouse hums quietly. Children have drifted to sleep beneath piles of wool and hide, their breathing soft and steady. Adults move slower now, their voices lowered, gestures deliberate. The storm is gone, yet the habit of caution remains, woven deep into every motion. You sit near the hearth again, watching how the flames twist and fold around the logs. The elder sits across from you, his eyes fixed on the same shifting light. Neither of you speaks for a while. Silence here isn't emptiness, it's a kind of conversation. According to one medieval Icelandic manuscript, families would often spend winter evenings in kvöldvaka, literally, evening wake. It wasn't a vigil in mourning, but a communal gathering for storytelling, weaving, carving, and quiet talk by the fire. No one slept early. The longhouse became a living book, its walls echoing with old words. You realize that you're about to witness the same ritual now. The elder clears his throat softly, and every movement in the room stills. Even the fire seems to lean closer. He speaks slowly, in a voice roughened by smoke and age. There was once a man, he begins, who tried to trap winter in his cellar so that the world could stay green forever. You smile faintly, recognizing the rhythm of legend. The others do too. They shift closer, wrapping themselves in furs, eyes half closed but listening. The story unfolds in unhurried cadence. The man gathers snow into barrels, seals them with pitch, and hides them underground. When spring comes, his field flourishes twice as bright as his neighbors. But then, one night, he hears the barrels whispering in the dark, voices cold as the moon, murmuring, "You cannot keep what belongs to the sky." The next morning, frost coats his crops, even under sunlight. Winter had found its way back. The elder pauses, letting the last words settle. The fire pops softly, as though agreeing. Then he adds, "That's why we don't fight the season. We live with it, as it lives with us." It's an old story, but it feels new in the telling. Perhaps that's the purpose of these nights, to remind everyone that even the cold has memory, and that harmony is wiser than resistance. Few people realize how central storytelling was to the Vikings' survival. In the longest dark, words became warmth. The sagas weren't only entertainment, they were insulation for the mind. Scholars analyzing oral traditions in northern settlements found that tales told in winter were more repetitive and rhythmic than summer stories built to lull, to comfort, to soothe restless thought. You feel that same soothing rhythm now. The elder's voice rises and falls like the tide, carrying the hall in its current. A woman near the far wall begins to add her own tale, softer, gentler. Hers is about a fox who tricks a frost giant by pretending to be firelight, leading him astray until sunrise. The story makes the children giggle, though their eyes are half closed. "The fox still runs in storms," she says at the end, smiling. "That's why the snow dances sideways." You glance at the fire again and see the shapes of the flames, slim, darting, fox-like. It's easy to believe that stories and fire are the same thing. Both start small, flicker wildly, and feed on attention. A delightful fragment from a later Scandinavian proverb says, "Words warm longer than embers." Sitting here, you understand exactly what that means. Even when the fire burns low, conversation sustains the room. The air itself seems to hum with quiet gratitude. A debated question among historians is whether these nightly gatherings influenced the structure of the later written sagas. Did the epic forms of Njal saga or Laxdala saga grow from these flickering moments? Many believe they did, that the rhythm of firelight became the rhythm of Norse prose, each line pulsing with memory of smoke and glow. The elder chuckles softly. "You can always tell when someone lies," he says, his tone playful. The fire leans away. Everyone laughs quietly. You look at the flame, half expecting to see it sway, but it doesn't. Perhaps that's proof the stories tonight are true. Then comes a lull. The only sound is the faint creak of wood and the sigh of sleeping bodies. The elder's eyes glint faintly as he pokes the fire with a stick, scattering sparks. "Every spark," he murmurs, "is an old word trying to be remembered." You realize he isn't being poetic, he's being literal. To him, every ember is ancestral, carrying breath from countless nights before. Fire is continuity, a living thread running through centuries. You think of the sagas you know, the ones that survived across oceans and generations. They began like this, perhaps spoken softly in rooms like this one, recorded not on parchment but in the rhythm of human hearts. A curious fact about Viking oral culture. The word saga itself means that which is said. It comes from sedja, to tell, not to write, not to command, but simply to speak. In this room, you can feel that meaning alive again. The fire dips lower. Shadows rise on the walls, their shapes shifting like the figures in the elders' tales. The air grows warmer, heavier, filled with the scent of resin and wool. The mood changes too, from lively to meditative. Stories slow, voices trail off. Someone hums a few notes of an old lullaby, the same melody you heard nights ago, maybe older than any of them. It drifts through the hall, blending with the crackle of wood. The sound is almost liquid, wrapping around you like water warmed by the Sunday. The elder speaks one last line, his voice barely above a whisper. "We are never alone in the dark. Every flame remembers its kin." And as you look around, at the faces half hidden in glow, at the smoke curling toward the roof like the ghost of 1,000 breaths, you understand. The Vikings didn't just outlast their winters, they filled them with words, warmth, and wonder. The cold might take everything else, but it could never steal their stories. You pull the fur tighter around your shoulders and close your eyes. The fire hums, the tales linger, and sleep comes softly, guided by the same rhythm that has carried countless souls through countless storms. You wake again to the soft murmuring of voices. The fire burns low, but steady thin flames, tall and blue at the tips, whispering around half-burned logs. The air carries the scent of wood resin and a faint sweetness, something floral. You blink, adjusting your eyes, and realize someone has hung herbs above the fire, bundles of dried meadowsweet and mugwort. Their perfume drifts through the smoke like memory. A woman moves quietly by the hearth, sprinkling something into the embers. Tiny sparks flash, and the scent deepens, sharp, clean, alive. It takes you a moment to recognize what it is. Salt. In the Viking world, salt was a precious thing, traded across seas and stored like treasure. Yet they burned it sometimes, not for flavor, but for blessing. Archaeological traces of sodium crystals found in hearth ash suggest this was a real practice, not superstition alone. Salted fires were thought to purify, to drive away unseen illness, to keep the air clear in homes sealed tight for winter. You can almost feel that purpose now, the invisible cleansing, the quiet renewal. She hums as she works, her song barely audible. The melody doesn't have words, only a gentle rise and fall, like the rhythm of breath. It feels familiar somehow, the same cadence as the lullabies, the same unhurried pulse of this entire world. The others stir gradually, faces emerging from furs. There's no hurry. Morning here is a gradual blooming, not a sudden command. Someone stretches, someone coughs softly, someone whispers a few words that dissolve into the warm air. The fire, as always, is the first voice of the day. Few modern people understand how intertwined health and fire were in the Viking mindset. According to Old Norse healing charms recorded centuries later, warmth itself was medicine heat as proof that the body still held life. Cold was not just discomfort, it was invasion, a creeping spirit that had to be driven out with flame, smoke, and ritual. You see that philosophy alive now as the woman fans the embers. She lifts a clay pot from a shelf and pours its contents a thick herbal brew into a bowl. Steam curls upward, rich with scent, juniper, yarrow, maybe even garlic. The air sharpens instantly, cutting through the heaviness of sleep. She hands the bowl to the elder, who sips slowly, eyes closing in quiet satisfaction. A curious find from Viking-age graves has puzzled scholars for years, small bundles of herbs placed near the chest of the dead. Some believed it to be for scent, others for symbolic warmth, to heat the spirit for its journey. Whatever the meaning, it suggests something profound. That warmth was not only survival but sanctity. You're handed a bowl of the same drink, and you lift it to your lips. The taste is bitter at first, then soft, earthy, and grounding. It spreads through you in a way that feels both physical and emotional, like being reminded of something your body once knew. The elder clears his throat after finishing his portion. "We drink the fire," he says simply. "It keeps us honest." His voice carries no humor, yet everyone chuckles softly, as if the saying is both proverb and inside joke. The conversation begins slowly, like Thor. People talk about the animals, the smoke hole, the walls. Someone mentions that a drift has blocked the path to the stream again. Another answers that it can wait, the melt will come soon enough. Every word, every decision, moves at the same patient pace. Historians studying northern communities often describe this as the rhythm of endurance, a deliberate slowing of life during winter. It wasn't laziness, it was adaptation. To rush was to waste heat, to stir the air, to tire the mind. Patience became the body's insulation. A faint sound outside interrupts the murmur, a soft tapping, then a long crack, like the sigh of ice breaking on a pond. Everyone goes still for a moment, listening. The elder nods slowly. "The snow loosens," he says. "The season turns." The words land softly, but you can feel their weight. The long darkness is easing, not gone, but changing. The air inside seems to lighten in response. You notice small details you hadn't before, droplets of meltwater sliding down the beams, the faint glint of moisture where frost once lingered, the smell of thaw. A strange but delightful observation from Norse texts is that they named nearly 20 kinds of snow and ice, each with its own character: slard for slippery ice, snore for new snow, krappi for slush, melda for wet melt. To them, the world wasn't frozen. It was alive with nuance. The language itself carried warmth because it saw difference where others saw only white. The woman who burned salt now takes down a fresh pelt from the wall and shakes it out, letting dust and feathers scatter. "Spring doesn't come all at once," she says. "It has to find its way back inside first." The elder smiles at that, as though he's heard the phrase before. Perhaps it's another of those quiet sayings passed from winter to winter. You glance around the hall, the smoke, the worn beams, the fur-lined sleeping platforms, all alive with that faint silver light of near spring. For months, this space has been a womb, holding everyone safe within its walls. Now, as warmth creeps in from the edges, it begins to feel like something else, a chrysalis about to open. A debated question among archaeologists concerns how much sunlight actually entered these homes. Some argue that the longhouses were intentionally dim, that darkness preserved heat. Others think that when spring neared, they opened the doorways wider, welcoming the fragile Sunday. Perhaps the truth, like most things here, was balance. Light only when earned, warmth only when ready. You run your fingers along the wall and feel moisture cold but promising. The world outside is waking, and somehow the house feels it too. A child toddles toward the doorway, clutching a carved wooden horse. Her mother follows, smiling, and together they look out into the blinding white. The snow still stretches endlessly, but the surface has changed softer, looser, glimmering faintly where sunlight touches it. The child laughs, pointing. The sound fills the room like a blessing. The elder watches them and murmurs. The earth exhales. You can hear it too, the faint, irregular dripping of meltwater, the quiet rhythm of release. In that moment, you understand that the Vikings didn't measure spring by flowers or warmth, but by sound, the music of thaw, the whisper of moving air, the slow surrender of ice. You sit by the fire again, feeling its heat against your palms. The air smells of herbs, smoke, and damp wood. Outside, the first drops of the coming season fall like notes of a distant melody. The fire crackles once, bright and golden, as if echoing that change. You smile and think, yes, spring is finding its way back inside. By the next morning, the air inside the longhouse feels unmistakably different. The cold still lingers, but it's thinner now, like a guest reluctant to leave. You can smell moisture where before there was only frost, wet wood, melting snow, and the faint sweetness of thawed soil seeping through the cracks in the floor. Somewhere above, a drop of water falls through the smoke hole and hisses softly in the coals. The first melt of the season has begun. You rise slowly, your joints stiff but not aching. The furs feel lighter today. The fire burns lower, not from neglect, but because the house itself has warmed. People stir one by one, stretching, blinking in the half-light that filters through the roof vent. There's no rush, no exclamation, just quiet recognition. The long wait is ending. According to environmental reconstructions of Norse settlements, this early thaw often came as a deceptive reprieve, a few days of gentler weather before winter returned for one last bite. The Vikings knew this and treated the first warmth not as victory, but as rehearsal. Never trust a smiling sky, one old Icelandic proverb warns. Still, hope has its own gravity. Someone hums while tending the fire, another begins grinding barley into coarse flour. The rhythm of the house feels lighter, less burdened. The elder sits near the doorway, sharpening his knife with a calm, steady hand. "We'll see the sea again soon," he says softly. The others smile at the thought. You move closer to the door and notice light creeping through the seams of the turf wall. Not the thin grey of stormlight, but the soft gold of the low Sunday. Dust motes shimmer in its path, turning the smoke above the hearth into a golden haze. You breathe in deeply, the air smells different now, less like confinement, more like promise. A fascinating discovery from coastal Viking farms reveals that during the first thaw, families often performed a ritual known as solvekja, waking the Sunday. They would open the main door, face east, and stand silently for a few breaths, as light entered the hall for the first time in months. It wasn't prayer so much as greeting, an acknowledgement between equals, the return of light, the persistence of life. The elder stands now, walks to the doorway, and lifts the bar. The door creaks open, spilling gold across the floor. The entire hall brightens at once. People blink, some shielding their eyes, others smiling outright. The warmth that enters is faint, almost imaginary, yet it feels like fire. For the Vikings, the sun wasn't just a celestial body, it was a traveller, a companion gone too long. The poetic Edda calls her the shining wheel that rolls through the sky, chased but never caught. After months of darkness, her reappearance must have felt like seeing an old friend return from war. The child from earlier toddles forward, reaching a hand toward the light. Her small fingers glow amber as the beam touches them. The mother laughs quietly. "See?" she whispers. "The world remembers us." That phrase lingers with you. The world remembers. It feels true after so much cold and silence. The land itself seems to stir, stretching awake. Outside, you hear faint sounds for the first time in days. The slow crack of ice shifting, the distant rush of hidden water beneath the snow. A debated question among scholars is how the Vikings marked the exact transition between winter and spring. Some point to festivals like Disablo, offerings to the spirits of fertility, others to private household rituals like this one. But perhaps the real ceremony was simpler: a shared breath, a moment of light, a pause to feel warmth on skin. The elder speaks softly, words you can barely catch over the hush. "Hold your faces to it," he says. "Let it see you alive." Everyone turns toward the light. Men, women, children, silent and still. The room fills with quiet reverence. You can almost hear the heartbeat of the house itself in that stillness. The turf walls, once rigid with frost, now seem to exhale. The beams gleam faintly with condensation, darkening where the sun touches them. The air shifts and moves tiny draughts, whispering like sighs of relief. A curious, often overlooked observation from Norse domestic life is that homes were rarely built facing north. Builders chose eastward openings, aligning doorways to the morning sun, even in places where sunlight barely reached. It wasn't architectural convenience, it was philosophy. Every dawn, however dim, was an act of defiance against the cold. The elder closes the door after a few minutes, preserving the warmth. But the mood has changed. The firelight feels friendlier now, no longer burdened with duty. Laughter ripples softly through the room. Someone starts tuning a small lyre, plucking gentle, wavering notes. The sound threads through the smoky air like sunlight translated into sound. Few instruments have been found intact from the Viking age, but those that survived tell stories. Gut strings stretched over wooden frames, their tones fragile but haunting. Archaeologists believe music filled long winters like this, not grand songs of battle, but simple melodies meant to hold time together. You listen now as the tune grows clearer, slow, circular, repetitive in a way that soothes. It's a melody for light returning, not triumphant, just tender. The child claps once, and everyone laughs again. The sound echoes off the wooden beams, filling the hall with something brighter than warmth: joy. It strikes you how powerful that must have been to feel joy without certainty. The thaw might vanish tomorrow, yet for this one day, sunlight has touched the skin again. Maybe that's the lesson of this world: to treasure impermanence, to find beauty even in borrowed warmth. A curious account in one medieval saga describes a family who, upon seeing the first sunlight after a long winter, dipped their fingers in melted snow and drew small runes on their cheeks, marks of protection, renewal, and gratitude. You think of that now, as a child dips her hand into a bowl of meltwater and smears it playfully across her mother's face. "There," she says proudly, "now you shine too." The woman laughs, wiping at the streak but not removing it entirely. The elder nods approvingly. "Let her keep it," he says. "Spring should know her name." The words linger long after. The fire hums low. The lyre continues its gentle rhythm, and the faint scent of herbs still hangs in the air. Outside, the sun slips behind a veil of grey, but its trace remains in every face, every spark of laughter. You lean back, closing your eyes. The warmth that fills the hall now isn't just heat, it's relief, faith, renewal. The kind of warmth that comes not from flame, but from knowing that the flame will always find a way to return. The days lengthen little by little, though here, the difference is measured more in feeling than in light. The darkness still falls, but it seems thinner now, less absolute. Even the cold carries a gentler edge. You wake to the sound of dripping from the roof, a slow, patient rhythm that fills the house like the ticking of a clock rediscovered. The longhouse smells different now. The smoke remains, yes, but beneath it is the scent of damp earth, of thawing moss, of something green waiting its turn. When you step to the doorway and pull it open, the world greets you not with silence, but with movement. Snowmelt trickles down the slopes, weaving thin rivulets through the drifts. The air tastes faintly of salt, as if the sea itself is breathing again beneath the ice. According to sediment studies from Norse coastal sites, these first weeks of partial thaw marked the true renewal of the settlements. Stored food dwindled, but the return of the tide meant access to seaweed, shellfish, and driftwood, small living gifts that signaled the year had turned. Even the smallest shift in sound or scent became celebration. Behind you, the hearth crackles softly. Someone adds peat to the coals, the familiar hiss of steam echoing through the hall. The light through the smoke hole is golden today, not grey. It strikes the floor like a benediction. The elder sits nearby, combing his beard with a bone comb polished smooth by years of use. He glances toward the doorway, his eyes narrowing against the brightness. "The sky forgets to be cruel," he murmurs, half in wonder. "Always sooner than we expect." A debated point among historians is whether the Norse people measured spring by calendar date or by signs: the tilt of sunlight, the taste of water, the return of certain bird calls. Most believe they followed sensation more than numbers. You suspect they were right. In a world so deeply intertwined with nature's moods, every sense became a timepiece. You step outside again and listen. Somewhere in the distance, a raven calls, its voice harsh but alive. The sound makes you smile. Ravens were the messengers of Odin, symbols of foresight and thought. Perhaps, in their language, this cry means, "We made it through." When you return indoors, you find the others already busy with quiet preparation. A woman is sorting the last of the winter stores: dried fish, smoked meat, barley, beans, laying them out on the floor to see what remains. Two men sit near the wall, mending a net with fine twine, their fingers deft even in the low light. The rhythm of survival has shifted again from endurance to readiness. Archaeological evidence supports this transition. In late winter, Norse families began repairing tools for spring hunts and planting. The activity wasn't frantic, but reverent. The tools themselves were almost sacred, repaired, oiled, sharpened, spoken to like old friends. Every task whispered the same truth: the world will open again, and we must be ready to meet it. You crouch beside the man sewing the net. He's humming softly, a tune with no words, steady as breath. You notice his hands scarred but graceful. He looks up, smiles, and says, "A net isn't made of string, it's made of faith." The line strikes you deeply. It isn't poetry for him, it's fact. In a world ruled by weather and chance, every act of preparation is an act of belief. To mend a net in darkness is to trust the sun will rise again. A curious discovery in Norse fishing villages revealed small charms carved into the wooden floats of nets, tiny runes for luck, or sometimes for warmth, drawn as if to remind the sea itself to be kind. Perhaps these carvings were less superstition than conversation. The Vikings didn't separate themselves from the elements. They spoke with them. The woman by the stores calls out softly. "We still have enough," she says. "For 2 weeks, maybe more." The elder nods without surprise. "Enough," he repeats, "is the word of spring." Everyone smiles at that, even the children. The atmosphere shifts again as evening approaches. The fire burns brighter, and the golden light deepens, turning the walls into shades of honey and bronze. A faint wind pushes through the cracks, carrying the scent of wet air, rich and heavy with promise. It smells like everything the long winter denied: grass, sea, soil. One of the women begins to sing not a lullaby this time, but a song with rhythm, the kind sung during work or travel. The melody rises and falls like oars cutting through waves. The others join in, tapping fingers, nodding heads. It's not loud, but it fills the hall with motion. Even the children sway to it, their laughter mingling with the music. Scholars studying the Eddic songs believe many of them originated as work chants like this, patterns of rhythm to keep time during long, repetitive tasks. But here, the purpose feels deeper. The song binds everyone together, knitting the air with sound just as the nets are knit with string. A curious, little-known tidbit about Norse singing is that some voices carried specific roles. Women's songs were said to calm the hearth fire, men's to steady the wind during travel. It wasn't magic exactly, it was a way of aligning with the world. When life depends on rhythm, you learn to live in harmony with it. The elder taps his hand against his knee in time with the tune. His eyes gleam faintly in the firelight, the wrinkles around them deepening into something almost like joy. "The ice listens," he says softly. "It melts faster when we sing." Everyone laughs, but no one disagrees. Outside you can hear faint dripping again, faster now. The air seems warmer, though the snow still holds. Inside, the longhouse feels lighter than it ever has, each person a thread in a fabric that no storm could tear. You look around and realize how little has changed, yet how much feels new. The same beams, the same hearth, the same smoke, but everything now hums with renewal. The Vikings didn't merely wait for spring, they called it forth. One voice, one song, one flame at a time. You close your eyes for a moment and listen to the music, the soft drip of meltwater, the low crackle of fire. It's all one sound now, the sound of the world remembering how to move. The song ends slowly, fading into contented silence. Someone stirs the embers, someone yawns. The elder rises, stretching his arms. "Soon," he says, "we'll walk in light again." And for the first time in months, you believe him completely. The last night of true winter arrives without fanfare. The longhouse stands calm, its walls glistening faintly with melt. The air is warmer now, not soft, not gentle, but alive, like a tide gathering before it changes course. You lie awake near the hearth, listening to the faint trickle of snowmelt dripping from the roof and the occasional sigh of wood adjusting to the new warmth. The fire burns low but confident, its glow steady and deep. The smoke rises smoothly through the roof vent, curling like silk before disappearing into the dark. Around you, the people sleep easily, no longer burrowed in heavy furs. Even the dogs are sprawled instead of curled, their bellies lifting and falling with slow, contented breath. According to environmental data gathered from Norse archaeological sites, this transitional phase between winter and spring was short but vital. Too early to plant, too late for pure survival, it was a time to repair, to clean, and to thank the hearth that had carried them through. The Vikings didn't see it as an ending, but as a handover from endurance to rebirth. You sit up and add a small piece of birchwood to the fire. It catches immediately, the bark flaring pale gold before settling into a soft glow. The smell, resin and warmth feels almost luxurious. For the first time in months, you're aware of the subtle texture of the air. Lighter, sweeter, full of oxygen from the thawing world outside. A curious, often overlooked ritual recorded in later Scandinavian folklore describes how families would feed the fire goodbye at the end of winter. They would toss the last handful of dried herbs or salt into the flames, thanking it for its labor, promising to wake it again next year. You find that image comforting, the idea that even a flame deserves gratitude. The elder wakes soon after, his face soft in the glow. He nods at you, then at the fire. "It's ready," he says. You're not sure what he means until you see him reach for a clay bowl and fill it with glowing embers. Carefully, reverently, he carries it toward the door. You follow, curiosity holding your breath. He opens the door, and the night greets you clear, cold, endless. The snow still glimmers, but it has sunk in places, pitted by melt. The air smells of salt and distance. He steps outside, crouches, and tips the embers into the snow. They hiss and crackle, tiny stars dying one by one, their light absorbed into the white. For a moment, its heartbreakingly beautiful flame surrendering to frost, heat giving itself back to the world. Then the elder speaks, voice barely louder than the wind. "Every fire sleeps," he says, "but it never forgets how to wake." You stand silently beside him, the cold biting at your cheeks. The last ember fades, leaving behind a small crater of steam. The snow sizzles quietly, then stills. In that moment, you understand. They're not extinguishing the fire, they're teaching it rest. You return inside, where the air feels suddenly richer, more alive. The longhouse glows with a calm unlike any you've felt before. This isn't victory, it's peace earned, held, and shared. A fascinating theory proposed by cultural historians suggests that such rituals of closure and gratitude helped shape the Viking sense of time as cyclical, not linear. Survival wasn't about escaping the cold, it was about acknowledging it, learning from it, and trusting its return. To live in harmony with the seasons was to live with the gods themselves. The elder sits again by the hearth, now dark but still warm. He exhales deeply, the sound soft as a sigh. "We keep the warmth in our bones now," he murmurs, smiling faintly. "It follows us to the fields, to the sea, to the next storm." You realize then that the fire was never truly confined to the hearth. It lives in these people, in their memory, in their patience. Every act they've performed, tending the coals, singing through blizzards, patching walls, sharing breath, has been an extension of that single flame. A curious artifact from a burial site in Iceland once baffled researchers: a small pouch containing ash and charred wood placed beside the deceased. Only later did they understand it was fire from the family hearth, carried into the afterlife. The last and greatest warmth, traveling beyond winter forever. You lie back on the furs one final time, letting your mind drift through all that has unfolded here. The storms, the silence, the songs, the steady breath of a people who made peace with the cold instead of fighting it. Their wisdom wasn't in power, it was in patience. You close your eyes. The house is nearly silent now, save for the faint dripping from the roof and the occasional murmur of sleepers dreaming. Somewhere in the distance, a raven calls again, softer this time, as if marking the end of a story. The elder's words echo quietly in your mind. Every fire sleeps, but it never forgets how to wake. You imagine spring arriving in a few weeks, the snow pulling back, the sea opening, the first ships setting sail again under pale blue skies. You see the same families who slept through blizzards now walking across thawing fields, faces lifted to sunlight. The warmth has moved from fire to flesh, from coals to hearts. And you understand, finally, how the Vikings truly survived their deadly winters, not through strength, or luck, or fury, but through care. Through the slow, deliberate art of keeping life warm in a world made of ice. The last of the coals sighs softly, collapsing into silver ash. You feel no sadness, only calm. The longhouse is ready to sleep, and so are you. Now, let your breathing slow. Feel the echo of the fire fading behind your eyes. The crackle softens into silence, and the cold no longer feels like an enemy, it's just the air outside, patient, waiting. Inside, everything is quiet and safe. The world has grown gentle again. You picture the snow stretching far into the night, reflecting the faint light of the moon. The longhouse rests beneath it like a heartbeat under a blanket. Somewhere within, the last curl of smoke rises, carrying the memory of warmth upward to meet the stars. The Vikings are asleep now, their dreams calm, their breath steady. The fire they tended so carefully glows inside them, still steady, unhurried, eternal. You can almost feel that same warmth behind your ribs, pulsing softly, as if your own heart remembers their rhythm. Outside, a thin wind hums low across the fields. It's not cruel anymore. It's simply part of the song, the old music of earth and sky, dark and light, silence and flame. You breathe in through your nose, slow and deep, as though inhaling the faint scent of wood smoke. Then let it go, again and again. Imagine yourself lying in that same longhouse, beneath soft firs, with the hush of snow all around you. The fire may be gone, but its warmth lingers, spread through the air like a promise. Sleep, like the Vikings, knowing that warmth always returns. Every flame sleeps, none forget how to wake. Good night.